right, everyone, we'd like to get started. I'd like to welcome you to the 12th Annual State of the State in Healthcare, Policy, Politics, and Pandemics in 2020. And before we start our program, I'd like to introduce a distinguished member of the New Jersey Superintendent of the New Jersey State Police, Mr. Colonel Patrick Callahan. He is a second-generation trooper. The state police has been in force for roughly 100 years, and for more than half a century, we've had a Callahan serve the state of New Jersey. Patrick's father was a major in the state police and retired several years ago. Patrick has proudly carried on his legacy, and his mom is a nurse, also a first responder, and Patrick's wife is also a nurse and a first responder. So we can't thank the Callahan family enough for what they've done for us here in the state of New Jersey. And as you know, Colonel Callahan was also instrumental in coordinating the efforts to get PPE to our frontline workers, establish field hospitals, field testing, and was instrumental in helping us get through the first wave of the coronavirus earlier this year. And we appreciate his support. He's probably the most distinguished and revered and respected colonel that's worked at the state police in 100 years. And I'd like to turn it over to the colonel at this point so he can lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you so much, Frank, and good morning, everybody. I'm joining you from Sussex Station up in Augusta in New Jersey, the tip of the state. I'm here with staff inspection to inspect the troopers, a long-standing tradition in the state police. I was in Cumberland County yesterday doing the same thing. COVID had kind of kept me from getting out and about to see the troops, but I was humbled and honored to be invited here. This pandemic, obviously unprecedented times for all of us, regardless of which line of work you're in. We are, gearing up, as Frank said, hoping the surge doesn't come. I had the honor to be with Dr. Birx all day. 2 days ago, we spent time at Rowan University and time at Rutgers, and her insight and leadership is just phenomenal. But I liked one thing that she said about responsibility and self-responsibility, and that was we need a surge in due diligence to prevent the next surge of COVID-19. So that kind of resonated with me, whether that's a birthday party you want to have for your grandmother, whether that's college students, whether that's somebody coming home and visiting. That's where this disease is spreading, and we're kind of seeing what happened in May down south when everybody went inside for air conditioning. Up here in the Northeast, we're going inside to get warm. So we have our eye focused on that. And again, I just am honored to be invited here and certainly welcome all of you to the 12th Annual State of the State Healthcare Symposium through the New Jersey Association of Health Underwriters. So at this time, without any further ado, regardless of where you are, I ask you to please stand and we will recite the pledges of allegiance together. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I turn it back over to you, Frank. I wish you all a successful conference, and God bless each and every one of you. Thanks again for the invite.
Thank you very much, Colonel. You will have a great day. My best to you and your family and all the troopers out there that are keeping us safe and healthy. And Godspeed, my friend.
Thank you. I salute you all. God bless.
Take care. All right. Well, we've just heard from the Superintendent of the State Police. Now I'd like to introduce Dale Florio. He's a longtime lobbyist with Princeton Public Affairs. And we are going to play a video that our own Carolyn Andrus had with Dale about our involvement as the New Jersey Health Underwriters Association. All right, we're having technical difficulties. Let's try this once more. This is our first go at a virtual conference, so just bear with us. We appreciate your support.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Carolyn Andrus, and for those of you that don't know me, I'm the immediate past president of the New Jersey Association of Health Underwriters, and I also am currently serving as the HIAPAC chair. Joining me today is Dale Florio from Princeton Public Affairs Group, recognized as the #1 lobbying firm in the state for over 15 years, so we're really proud that we have them watching our back. And Dale Florio has been recognized as one of the most influential people in the state. So I have to say, I first spoke to Dale back in 2015, and Dale, thank you for joining us today. But when we spoke back, it was funny, when we spoke back in 2015, our HIAPAC fund had $18,000 in it. And now we're almost reaching $100,000 this year. We plan that is our goal. So it's been a tremendous partnership and effort that we've had together. What impact do you feel that that's had on our voice in the state?
You know, it's interesting that you reminded me of the 2015, because I also think in that meeting, you asked, or somebody asked, you know, how much should we have? You know, what is a meaningful amount? Because, you know, rightly or wrongly in politics, political officials, they look to see, you know, is a group able to raise money? Because that's a big part of, you know, politics, not only in New Jersey, but nationally. And I think I said at that time, $100,000. So the fact that we're here today and, you know, you've reached that goal on a sustaining basis is very impressive. And it's a, you know, you've done a lot of work on it, as well as others have in the association, to get you to this point. And, you know, it puts you in the room, so to speak. I know that there are a lot of people that look at money in politics as a bad thing. My response to that is it's just part of your First Amendment freedoms, you know, speech, participation. Participation also means being able to write a check and support, or in opposition, you know, to a candidate. And that's important. People don't necessarily connect, you know, supporting a candidate or supporting a PAC so that you can support candidates, or maybe, you know, you want to support candidates that are running against candidates that you don't want to see get reelected. That's very important also. And that's a big part of politics in New Jersey.
For sure. And I would say too, you know, we certainly have a diverse population in NJAHU and different political affiliations and ideals. And I find that many members are often frustrated at times with what's happening in the state. In terms of that, you know, what would you respond to them to say the difference that we can make in this state when you are frustrated with politics, with the political landscape?
There's nothing worse than having a conversation with somebody who says, well, I didn't vote last time, and then proceeds to grumble about what they don't like, whether it's a local issue or a national issue. I take that opportunity every time to say, first of all, that's your fault for not voting. And then two, I often point out, especially if I know them to be, you know, what their profession is, I said, does your company or does your profession lend itself to participation in an association? And, you know, do you take some political action, participate in their, when they do visits with legislators or members of Congress? Do you write a check to their PAC? And sometimes, you know, they'll know what a PAC is, other times they won't know what a PAC is, and I'll explain. So, you know, that's a way for you, if you can't commit the time, committing money to allow your association to support candidates that support your profession is very important. I mean, democracy is not a spectator sport, and certainly in New Jersey, it's often referred to as a block. And a big part of that is making sure you support candidates not only with your vote, you know, but with your money.
That's so true. And, you know, we all have our own roles in our business and our own lives, right, that we have to focus on. And I think it's so important that we have you and your team at the forefront looking out for our interests because sometimes it moves very quickly. I'm sure we can think of examples in this past year where legislation was moving really fast and we need to respond quickly. So we do appreciate that support and the contributors that really deserve the kudos for getting those dollars where we need them to be to make sure that we are represented and have a seat at the table. When you think about, over the year, you've worked closely with our legislative chair, I shouldn't say just over the year, many years with our legislative chair, Desmond Slattery. What difference do you feel that it's made the increase in the funds in the PAC?
Sure. I often say that if you're not in the State House on a day-to-day basis, working on bills or talking to administrative agencies about regulations, the next best place to be is our fundraisers. And by PAC, by having a robust PAC, you can have your members go to various fundraising events and actually meet not only the legislator and who's honored the events being held, but oftentimes other legislators come to support that individual. So building that network and seeing people outside of the legislative arena is critical. I mean, I've watched various association members get to know legislators on my watch as I've seen them at different fundraising events, and that's critical. I mean, it's one thing for them to know me as kind of your legislative quarterback. It's also very important they actually know members of folks that are actually doing the work that you do. It's critical. I've seen it prove to be beneficial when legislative issues have arisen. They know Desmond, they know Dave Mordo, they know some of the others as well. And there's the ability to have those conversations about the importance of issues. It's also given the Health Underwriters Association a chance to participate in a lot of the other insurance coalitions. We've worked on bills together. The association has played a bigger role in those coalition efforts. The other benefit has been, I think, starting with the Christie administration and now the Murphy administration, the Department of Banking and Insurance really wants to know what the association has to say about things that they're working on. The health exchange has been, the most current. Now, I know we're not entirely happy with everything that's going on. I think we'd like to be much more involved in some of the marketing. But the fact is that they are listening. They have engaged. They want to know what we think, and they have taken some of our suggestions. That wouldn't necessarily be the case if we weren't politically active, right? So there's something to be said for the old adage, about the squeaky wheel. I think the association has definitely become a very squeaky wheel.
And when you think about that too, with us having a voice, we're mainly a Democratic state, we lead Democratic typically. But there's
Right.
different sectors of that, right, in different parts and pockets of the state. So, if you have a different opinion, we always want to speak with one voice. We always say that. And I think that partnering with, for instance, Public Affairs Group and the alliances we've made have allowed us to do that with one voice, even if we do have personally a different interest. Where would you say as an individual that we should be focusing our attention? Is it more getting involved, going to those events? Is there other ways that we can get involved and make sure that our voice of the membership is heard?
Well, certainly getting more members willing to attend the events gives the associations truly statewide reach. I often see kind of 3 or 4 members who tend to go to a lot of them, but the more members who are willing to say, hey, listen, I can get to that event, I think the better. 2, just getting to know your legislator. We started this a couple of years ago. I think we got away from it, but there should be efforts to get to know legislators in your area, so that, and it doesn't have to be at a political fundraiser, but to schedule an appointment, go in with maybe 1 or 2 of your colleagues in the area to talk about the health exchange or any other issue that might be topical at the time. We're certainly there to give you kind of background information on what you might want to talk about. But the Teachers Association does a very effective job of kind of a key contact network where they make sure that they've got teachers. Obviously, there are a lot of them, right? But they make sure that there are teachers that are signed up to make sure that they get to know Assemblyman so-and-so or Senator so-and-so. And when all of a sudden, we're in the heat of a legislative battle, having that relationship already existing can be very beneficial to the outcome of the battle.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Really, really good point. When I think about back again to our conversation back in 2015, it was, if not now, when you're going to contribute, when we have a state-based exchange, and here we are. So, it does make a difference, and I know that you're going to be speaking to our membership today. They're going to have the opportunity to hear your insight and perspective. And then again, on October 22nd, I just want to remind the audience that our High Impact contributors will have a special session with Dale, where we'll take a little bit deeper dive into some political issues in our state. So if you're not contributing, please do so now. We have over 550 members in the state, and many people think, I don't really have that money, even $10. We had 100 people give $10 a month. That's $1,000 a month, $12,000 a year. So if you're not contributing, I remember pleading for your support, and we did get a lot of people to join. But if you haven't been contributing and you're not sure, you need some more information, please reach out to me, reach out to NJAHU. Our voice makes a difference for ourselves, for our clients, for our industry. So I want to thank Dale for all of your work and your team, and it's been a real pleasure partnering with you over the years.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Carolyn. Although Carolyn couldn't be here with us today, she's here in spirit, and she ran the interview with Dale. Now I have the distinct pleasure and honor to have Dale Florio of Princeton Public Affairs, our longtime lobbyist, here with us live. And Dale, we'd like to thank you for your time, and we greatly appreciate your guidance and assistance and perspective when dealing with the political landscape in New Jersey. And I'd like to turn it over to you at this point.
Well, thanks so much, Frank. It's good to be here this morning. Kudos to you and the team for putting together a tremendous program here today. You're going to hear from some friends of the association today with Minority Leader Bramnick, Senator Gopal, the Commissioner of Banking and Insurance, Arlene Caridi, and then, of course, the State Health Commissioner, Judy Persicelli. So obviously in these interesting times, what they have to say is going to be very, very important. I was asked to comment on a few things before Minority Leader Bramnick comes in, and some of that was already covered in the video. The association has made tremendous leaps and bounds in developing its PAC. So I guess I'll put a live pitch in for the PAC. It has clearly made a difference in the industry's ability to navigate Trenton. There is no question, since the exchange was first talked about during President Obama's term, and now that we have an exchange, there's no question that the political activism that the industry has engaged, which includes the PAC, has made a real difference in our ability to have a seat at the table. It's something that doesn't happen overnight, but we have certainly arrived. I mean, it's routine that I'll get questions from members of the Assembly Financial Institutions Committee or the Senate Commerce Committee, where typically bills of interest to us end up. Chairman McKeon and Chairwoman Poe are very interested in what the association has to say. So, as I said, it's something that takes a long time, and this association made a commitment 7 or 8 years ago to want to be active politically, and you're there now. So let's keep it up, and the more folks that we can get to engaged, whether it's to be involved with Trenton activities or at fundraisers, where you can build a network of political contacts, and not bad for business, I might add. But political contacts would be important. So, you know, in New Jersey, we have elections every year. And while there was a big one this year, there's another big one coming next year. So I was asked to comment just about the upcoming gubernatorial contest, which, you know, for most people is, you know, less than 30 days away, because typically in New Jersey, the next election starts the day after the previous election. Governor Murphy has already indicated that he intends to seek the Democratic nomination. On the Republican side, the only announced candidate is Assemblyman Jack Ciattarelli, who ran in the Republican primary last time. I think there's an expectation that there will be other Republican candidates, but at this point, there are no other announced ones. I think maybe a year or so ago, there was the thought that maybe Governor Murphy might experience a primary, but that seems to have washed away, at least at this point. His poll numbers very early on in his administration, through the first year and a half, almost two, were, you know, not as impressive as I think he might have liked them to be. However, when the pandemic started late February, early March, the governor was able to show his leadership abilities, and at least all the public polls certainly indicate that his handling of the pandemic has reached voters, and he has anywhere between 60 and 70% favorability ratings at this point in time. So it's a big difference than 2 years ago, and you know, we have no idea where the pandemic is going to lead us. But Governor Murphy has his favorabilities have increased during this period of time. So, you know, clearly it will make it more difficult for any Republican candidate next year. Keep in mind also that not only will the governor's race be in play, but we'll also have our legislative races. Both the Senate and the Assembly will be up for re-election. Republicans are in the minority in both houses. Democrats have reasonable, sizable pluralities there. Typically in New Jersey, there are maybe 5 to 6 districts that are typically in play for possible changes. Redistricting adjusts that every 10 years. We are coming up on a redistricting year. Although on the ballot, if you haven't voted yet, you will note that there is a proposal to delay redistricting another year because of the lack of census numbers. Obviously, during the pandemic, it's been difficult to count people, and the federal government has extended the counting period. So there is a proposal to delay next year's redistricting. So, but that is coming, and redistricting, as I said, can change the shape of districts. But in New Jersey, at least for the last 2 decades, typically we've seen maybe 5 or 6 districts in play. So until we have next year's elections in the Assembly and the Senate, we won't see any possible changes with makeup of committees or leaders, for that matter. I think it is worth noting that both Speaker Coughlin and Senate President Sweeney announced within the last 2 weeks that they believe they have enough votes to be renamed leaders next year. Somewhat unusual that would happen a year out from when the election actually occurred, but they did it, and at least today they have the votes for it, so they're likely to be the legislative leaders next time around. I guess the last thing I would comment on are the issues that we can expect now that once we get beyond the November election, that will be taking center stage. And I know you're going to hear from Ward Sanders later, as well as Anthony Russo from Commerce and Industry Association. But I would fully expect, now that we have a budget in place that is at least designed to provide a $2.2 billion surplus at the end of the next fiscal year, that K through 12 funding will always be an issue. Managing the pandemic and what it means to small business will be also top of the line. I also think the governor and legislature are looking to see how they can best control costs, and some of that will have to do with the public pension programs. So, and as always for us, the unveiling and the ongoing development of the health insurance exchange will be primo number one for us. So we'll be looking for legislative and regulatory adjustments as we go forward. So enjoy the rest of your day, and congratulations on what appears to be a terrific lineup, Frank.
Dale, thank you very much. We greatly appreciate all your support, your insight, and you're invaluable to our organization. And we can't thank you enough for your time. So thanks again, and we look forward to next time. Okay, next up, we have Republican leader, Assemblyman John Bramnick. John, good morning. Welcome to the program. We're thrilled and happy and ecstatic that you've taken time out of your day to meet with us. We'd like to get the Republican perspective on what's going on in New Jersey, and we are looking forward to your personal flair and input. And I'd like to turn it over to you at this point.
Thanks, Frank. Good to see you and Dale Florio. You do a terrific job. You're the class of Trenton. So it's good to hear you and listen to you, because in national politics, we might have lost some of the class that Dale Florio brings to the table. So I'm going to make this simple. Government's got to get out of the way of health insurance premiums, health insurance coverage, unless there's a few limited areas that maybe government should get involved in. The more the state of New Jersey tinkers around with healthcare coverage, the more likely it will get more expensive. And when you over-regulate something and you take the private sector out of it, it's a disaster for the consumers. Now, I have a law office with about 55 employees, so I buy health insurance. And I got to say, there's limited options, right? It always seems as if it gets more expensive, but I can't limit what I buy. Government needs, in order to reduce costs, is let private insurance companies offer numerous products that will make it cheaper and more reasonable for people like me, who we pay half of the insurance premiums, my law firm, and we let the employee pay the other half. And what that does is everybody's got skin in the game. The problem is the options are so limited in terms of your industry providing options to small businesses such as myself, that it just gets more expensive. Now, of course, there's certain things that should be mandated in an insurance company, in an insurance policy. Unfortunately, the same thing happened in auto insurance. They tinkered with it so much, and it's so confusing and so over-regulated that it became very, very expensive. And years ago, the legislature had to intervene and actually reform that, because we were losing all of the insurance companies in New Jersey. No one wanted to write. Well, eventually that's going to be the same situation here. The governor has raised $740 million of new taxes on the backs of consumers who buy health insurance. And the Democratic legislature, led by the governor and the executive branch, 2.5% a tax on insurance policies. You know, that's paid by the consumer. So my point is this: the last thing we need is single payer. When I was growing up, the best and the brightest went to medical school. Now, the sons and daughters of my friends, who are the leading doctors in New York, New Jersey, and around the country, none of their kids are going to medical school. They're all going to Wall Street. You know, these docs are smart. They're going like this: I'm not going to be micromanaged, where all of a sudden the government's going to tell me what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. You know, with all due respect to government, we're really not good at much. I'm not, you know, I used to say maintaining the roads and maybe the military. You know, there's so many political interests in all of these policy-making endeavors that it becomes a disaster for the consumer. Maybe 20 years ago, maybe when there was discussions between Republicans and Democrats, maybe when policy ruled, maybe we had some good policy. Those days are over. I mean, you listen to the debates, right? It's this, right? How do you sit down? How do you sit down with the other side and come up with a reasonable policy so people can have private health insurance with reasonable requirements and options when people don't talk to each other? So this is part of an overall problem, but when it comes to health insurance, it's more of a problem because it's a complicated field. It's a complicated policy area. So I'm saying the most important thing is don't turn over health insurance to government. It will destroy the incredible system we have now. And I'm just going to throw a couple of examples. At my age now, at 67, people call you and they tell you bad stuff, right? I mean, you hate to hear it, but then they'll go to the top surgeon in the world, right? In New York City or in New Jersey or in Pennsylvania. They'll go to the top hospitals. Those doctors and those hospitals, unless you pay them, where are you going to get these people? So we need to pay money for insurance. You know, it's a good idea, but I think that don't let the government take over. I'm happy to answer questions, but unfortunately, it's become a political football and it threatens our health care. I mean, I know people from Canada, you know, they came here for health insurance. I used to have one joke that used to be the reason the only wall I wanted was to keep the Canadian geese out of New Jersey because they were coming in for health insurance too. Thought that was pretty good, Dale. If I get Dale Florida to laugh, let me see him a little closer. I got a smile. He's a tough audience, just so you know, Dale. He's, you know, he's a great guy. Not that funny though, you know what I mean? But let me tell you, in terms of a government affairs person, fabulous. But as I said, please keep fighting to keep government out of my hospital bed. That sounds a little weird, you know what I mean? You know, but, well, I don't know. It's kind of, I maybe do some jokes on that. Sorry. Anyway, I'm happy to answer questions, but I think basically you shouldn't talk too long. And when you say in closing, you should close.
Okay, I guess that's the close.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much the deal.
Oh, John,
Yeah.
we appreciate your passion, your candor, and your thought process on this. This is a hotly debated topic, and yes, in a utopia society, it would be great if everyone could afford healthcare and get the services that they need to live a quality life. Unfortunately, the reality is that medical insurance and medical care costs a lot more money than the average person understands.
And guess what? Let me say one thing. If I'm
Go
going
ahead.
to pay for something, right? I'll pay for good doctors, right? I'll buy a cheaper car, right? I'll go to a less expensive restaurant. Happy to do that. But I want medical care to be the best, even if it's expensive. I don't want government taking it over, and I don't want government taxing it. One other thing, Dale Florio's background. Now, in the future, if Zooms continue, I'm getting a background like that. Look at that. Look at that conference room. Let me tell you something. Everybody else, you got a wall with one diploma on it. I got some mess behind me. He looks like he's at a mansion in you know, in Europe. Look at that. Look at that place. It's unbelievable. You know. That's what you do. Princeton, the name itself is cool. Princeton Public Affairs, right? Now, would you want a different background with a name like that? Of course not. What do you want? One diploma in the back? I'm sorry. If I don't have some fun in this job, you know, you can imagine.
Yeah.
So,
Hey, Dale, do you care to comment or make any, or join the conversation here?
he can't because the Great Poupon is being passed at this point. Sorry. He's on mute anyway.
My only comment is that I haven't seen that conference room in 2-3 months, so I'm anxious to get back in there. Frank, as I've told legislators who keep having all these fundraisers, they won't let us back in the State House, but they want the HIAPAC to contribute. So we got fair is fair here, right?
Yeah. Well,
Exactly.
Well, to tell you the truth, without fundraisers, right, the other side will completely destroy us, right? So we got to do those fundraisers. We have to take the risk. You know, I got my mask. Actually, I'm wearing 2 masks, or maskers. It says the plural for mask is maskers. Let me see here. There we go. I got one more here. There we go, 2. There we go. There we go. Anyway, sorry, I just, as I said, most of these things can, I shouldn't say it this way, but things can be boring. So, look at it. Hey, let me, is that there's an old joke. They said, I went up to Don DeFrancesco. Don't change your background. Went to Don DeFrancesco once and I wrote, hey, Don, governor, I'm a Republican. He says, Republican, Democrat, alligator, crocodile. So behind there, look, is that a Republican or Democrat? Same.
Thank you so much, John. We appreciate your humor, your insight, and most of all, your time. So thank you very much, and have an enjoyable day. And we'll
Thanks so
have you
much.
back another time.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay. We have now the Democratic perspective. We're looking to introduce State Senator Vin Gopal. And I believe he's joining the group momentarily or had some technical difficulties. So if you'd like to bear with us a moment, we're awaiting his arrival. And I will also open the mic to Dale to see if he had any comments or would like to say anything relative. He paid you multiple compliments, and we reiterate that sentiment and are very appreciative that you're on our team because you've helped us many years down the line and helped us form new relationships with legislature, and we really appreciate that.
No, I appreciate that, Frank. It's always obviously good to get the feedback because, right, I think in anything we do, you rarely get a pat on the back when folks say you do a good job. You certainly hear otherwise. But I would just comment on I guess I guess John maybe ran out of time to talk about, and that was obviously the presidential race. I mean, in New Jersey, we know that President Trump is not going to win New Jersey, and certainly just the last 2 weeks of the president and his team getting COVID appears to make it very difficult. I think there's 3 states that people want to watch on election night, and nobody's really talking about it, but I think Arizona is a very key state. We typically talk about Ohio and Florida, North Carolina, but I would look at Florida, Ohio, and Arizona. The president has to win those states. Last time around, the bonus states were Wisconsin and Michigan. But if we see early in the night that Arizona, Ohio, and Florida are not going to go his way, I don't think it's going to take 2 or 3 weeks to count votes. So watch for that. And I see Senator Gopal is now joining us. So I'll step back.
Thank you again, Dale. At this point, we do have State Senator Vin Gopal. He represents the Democratic Party, and we're very pleased and honored to have him join us this morning to give his perspective on the Democratic perspective in the state of New Jersey. And at this point, we'd like to turn the floor and camera over to State Senator Gopal.
Thank you, Frank, and thanks, Dale. And I'm sorry for being about a minute or 2 late. I apologize. Hope everyone is doing well, healthy, happy, and safe. This upcoming election, I've always, when I got into the Senate about 2.5 years ago, one of my most important components of what I wanted to bring to the state Senate was civility. In fact, one of the first people I met was a senator from Sussex County, Steve Orho, who to this day is probably my favorite person from either party, even though we agree on not that much. But when it comes to political civility and we talk about our families and we talk about what our interests are, that is what I find in him. And I think that's what this national election has really come to. There's a reason why six cabinet members from President Bush's administration has endorsed Joe Biden, which is unheard of, unprecedented. Why Governor Kasich, a former Ohio governor and presidential candidate, is endorsed, Cindy McCain. The list continues, Colin Powell. This is pretty unheard of. And while I've talked to many Republicans. I represent a pretty Republican county, one of the counties that Donald Trump won my county by 33,000 votes. So it's outside of Ocean County. It was one of the most Republican counties in the Northeast. But the number of people I've talked to who are like, listen, I'm a conservative. I'm a Republican. I believe in certain issues, but this guy, when I see what he does on Twitter, when I see his lack of civility, what he said to on veterans and on so many different issues, it really becomes hard to stomach supporting him. I think COVID-19 is a good example in all of that, as we've seen really just a lack of planning and a failure in governing during this pandemic. I mean, if there's any one team that should not have gotten COVID-19, it should have been the president and his team. And we've seen, because of just a lack of empathy, why we're in that situation. So President Biden has a plan that to combat and overcome COVID-19. He has put out on his website, joebiden.com, a full public health response to curb its spread and provide treatment, a full economic response to provide real relief to American workers, families, and economy. We're seeing that right now during the second stimulus package that should have been negotiated. But that is what I think we should do. So, and then third, the reinstatement of the local tax deduction that has been taken away. So I think on this election, it's pretty clear. I was asked to come on here today to represent. Someone in the comment room seems upset that I'm criticizing the president. I was asked to come on to talk about President Joe Biden's campaign, as well as the Democratic Party platform. And then when it comes to public health, I think that is what our key is going to be for the year ahead, not just as far as expanding testing, but also to make sure that we have an economy that works, to make sure that it's measured, to make sure that there is a national policy. So when there are hotspots in the country, we're focused on that hotspots. We're not unnecessarily shutting down places that need to be up and running. There are places of the country that should absolutely be 100% open right now. And other areas, we've got a few spots in New Jersey that should not be up and running. And so to have a national policy, I think, is really important. So, on behalf of the Democratic side, I think this election is pretty clear. I've been someone who's always voted. I've zigzagged the ticket, and I will again this year, not at the federal level, but I think this one is a hard one, because when I look at Republican presidents in the past, Ronald Reagan and George Bush, former nominees like Mitt Romney and John McCain, I just see such a big difference in where the Republican Party is going. So that is defending or supporting the Democratic Party platform. I think he's got an outstanding vice presidential candidate who did great last night, and I think if they're elected, they're going to bring civility back to politics. I think they're going to bring some unity back. I think they're going to, even with folks who are disagreeing vigorously, that they disagree with respect. I'm sure my friend Assemblyman Bramnick, who is here to represent President Trump, probably disagrees with me a little bit. But I know that at the end of the day, listen, the president still hasn't come out saying that he supports a transition of power. I mean, these aren't even liberal or conservative philosophies. These are American democratic philosophies that are the core of it. We can disagree on everything else, but when we disagree on stuff like this, it becomes problematic. So it was great to be with everyone. I hope I accomplished what I was supposed to do.
Yes, State Senator, we appreciate your insight and support and the the one thing that lacks in this country is respect. And one is entitled to their opinion, and civility is non-existent anymore. And we appreciate you coming on, being honest and candid, and giving us your perspective. That's what we asked you to do. I will ask panelists, you're entitled to your opinion, but don't be disrespectful to others by sharing your opinion on the panelist format, because we want to keep this an open dialogue and get different perspectives. That's how we learn and grow as an organization, and that's how we grow and learn as a community. And to have our community leaders and our local leaders be a part of our program is a really big asset to what we're trying to do and accomplish. Let me ask you, State Senator, if you don't mind, giving us some comments on the where you think the government should step in relative to healthcare. How involved should they be? And what is your ideal situation relative to providing affordable healthcare to the people of New Jersey?
So I think that we're debating. We have a Senate Health Committee at 1 o'clock, and we had this debate over the last 3 days where we had to pull a bill that affected hospitals yesterday. There's been a struggle over the last several years. We've seen a decline in mom and pop doctors' practices, individual medical practices, and we've really seen a growing strength in the hospital industry that has been buying up, and that's absolutely their right to do it, right? But they're buying up urgent care centers, they're buying up medical practices, and it's becoming a much more hospital-driven environment. They're all technically not for profit. I think, healthcare, I believe every person should have certain humane rights. And that's just my worldview, my philosophy. I think healthcare is one of them. I think because you're born in a certain zip code, you should not be denied basic life healthcare. It shouldn't be based on luck of the draw. Everything else we can put. You got to work hard in life. You got to do all the other stuff. I get all that. Absolutely. But when it comes to like healthcare, education, there are core components. I think it should not matter, and you should not be done by chance. So I believe that, we need to look at a public option. We need to look to see how we can make healthcare affordable. I think we need to make sure that private brokers can compete in a healthy market against each other. I obviously don't support a government-run healthcare system. I think that could be problematic just based on data in other countries. But I believe in I think a healthy system. I think government can play a role in competition and in prices, but it has to do it in that way of competition and prices, not trying to overtake any system. So as long as the entire system is bringing down and we're getting the best quality of healthcare and the best quality of services, that's all we can ask for.
Well, thank you once again, Senator Gopal. We appreciate your time, your perspective, and we'd love to have you back at another symposium in the future. And thanks once again. We appreciate it.
Thank you guys very much. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, we're going to move on in our program. And our next speaker is Mr. Anthony Russo. He's president of the New Jersey Commerce and Industry Association. And he is on the front lines as far as small businesses and in New Jersey, how they're being affected by the pandemic, and giving his perspective relative to what the future holds for us immediately and long-term as it relates to this pandemic. And we're thrilled and happy to have him and his and the industry represented by Mr. Russo. And at this time, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Frank. Good morning, everybody. And I also want to thank Jonathan and Lisa for thinking about us. Just to give you some perspective on who we represent, we've existed since 1927. We represent about 900 different companies from virtually every business sector. And that's one of the things that I enjoy about my job is every day I get to talk to small business owners, large business owners. And just to give you a flavor, we represent LG, Sharp, United Airlines, down to small family-owned businesses, landscapers, printers, movers, lawyers, accountants, bankers. So I enjoy the discourse with really getting a sense from every sector, what life has been like since March. And I could tell you that not one industry and not one business owner thought when the order was declared back in March to shut down and to go home and work from home. I don't think anybody knew it was going to last this long. And I still think there's a lot of folks that are just, wondering, when is this going to end? When are we going to get back to even a new normal, just a normal? And just to give you a sense of the timeline and what the impact of this pandemic has had on businesses, since March, I think the Governor Murphy, has issued more than 50 executive orders. So think about that. 50 executive orders that our business owners had to read and see if they complied with it. And I hope that when we do this post-mortem report and update that, the term essential versus non-essential kind of disappears, because quite frankly, every business is essential. And I'll give you an example. The three hardest hit industries back in March were obviously food, right? Restaurants, travel, and also retail. And what nobody really appreciated back then is it's just not those industries that were impacted, but the supply chain. And I'll give you a couple of anecdotes where we represent manufacturers. And one manufacturer had a contract with Bed Bath & Beyond, and they make bathroom mats. So when retail was shut down, they got the call and said, stop that order. And he unfortunately had to furlough his employees. And that's what happened in the early days of this pandemic. Is business owners were kind of caught off guard. We all were reading about what was going to happen. We just didn't know what government was going to do about it, right? We didn't know what the severity of the health impacts were, the impact on the economy. So what did a lot of folks do? They called their attorneys, they talked to their HR people, and they furloughed their employees with the expectations that those employees would probably return in about a month, 2 months. Then what happened, right? Washington passes the first stimulus package, right? And it was all about the Paycheck Protection Program. Then it was EIDL. And then, who became a rock star back then, right? And I'm thinking, this is April, May, June, but the Small Business Administration. I can't tell you, when we had the two gentlemen that run the New Jersey office, Al Toro and John Blackenstock, they were rock stars in the sense that our members really wanted to hear that information. How do I apply for that PPP? How do I apply for that EIDL? And New Jersey had, through the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, had similar grants and loan programs. So there was a scramble in the spring to apply and receive those monies. Those monies were distributed. Then I got a phone call from one business owner, it was a restaurant, that said, Tony, it's great. I got the PPP loan, but I can't generate revenue. So now what do I do? So then what happened in the summer was a lot of these employees that were furloughed unfortunately turned into permanent layoffs. As one accountant said to me, they said, Tony, watch what's going to happen, right? October 15th is a big date. It's the corporate tax returns. What's going to happen is the first and second quarter of this year are going to be okay. The first quarter, the economy was strong. Second quarter, what helped was the PPP loans, right? It was the grants. It was the $600 extra a week unemployment insurance for individuals who were laid off. It was the $1,200 stimulus checks. Really where it's going to come back and haunt us, I think, is in the third quarter and the fourth quarter, where I think the economy and businesses are going to be off. And I'll just share with you, and again, this is every sector that I've talked to. Now, granted, there are sectors that actually thrived, right? Whether you're in healthcare, the food companies, right? When you think about grocery stores, but we're talking about 30 to 80% losses for the year. And so that has a trickle down effect. And that trickle down effect is going to be that since day one, and I remember when all the business groups got on the phone with Governor Murphy and his team, first thing that dried up back in March and April was cash flow, right? If you run a business, you all know it's about accounts receivables, accounts payables. Everybody started holding on to their money. Everybody started wondering, okay, when is this pandemic going to be over? And that still remains an issue to this day, is cash flow. And that's something that I think the governor, president, people in Washington need to appreciate, that what businesses are concerned with. And I'm proud to say that I'm an unaffiliated voter. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. We truly look at business through that business lens, right? Whether it's that businesswoman, businessman that has to make payroll, what is it that keeps them up at night? And this uncertainty that's going on in the world is really just not good for the economy. It's not good for us. I don't think it's good for the nation, and it creates that uncertainty. But what happens when businesses face uncertainty? They hold on to that cash. They don't invest. They don't expand. They don't locate and grow the business. So, that unfortunately was the first 4 months. Now, this is what, month 7 of the pandemic. What happened over the summer? And I remember over the summer talking to a lot of business owners, architects, right? Building management owners, developers, and they all said, well, we're reconfiguring our offices. We're going to put up the plexiglasses. We're going to put up signs, and we're going to sanitize more. So then you saw a lot of that going on over the summer. So the big question I keep getting asked is, well, Tony, what are other members doing? What are the businesses doing? Are they bringing their employees back? Are they not bringing their employees back? And I could tell you, best way to say this is it's been a mixed bag. There are large companies that still are keeping their employees working remotely. And then there are others that have been back since April or May, and that they've staggered their employees back. They give them the personal protective equipment. They give them the policies about washing and cleaning. But it's a mixed bag. And what has that resulted in? And I could tell you, for a lot of our businesses and our lifeblood at NJAHU, we were doing 80 or 90 in-person events a year, where people would always tell me what they enjoyed about the events is when you grabbed that cup of coffee and you could shake 10 hands. Now, I don't know if anybody's going to shake hands anymore, but that's gone, that camaraderie, that ability. One person said to me just the other day that really what was important was not the event that you put on, Tony, but it was the pre-event, and then it was the after event. When you're walking out of a meeting, you got to network and say hello and build business. I got to tell you, people are Zoom fatigued. A lot of members are at a point now where, you can't generate new leads. It's more difficult, not that it's impossible, but that's what I've been hearing, is that it's just almost impossible to generate new leads when we're living in a virtual world. So fast forward, the state passes a budget. We actually, and I know Assemblyman Bramnick, Minority Leader Bramnick, mentioned the health insurance tax. That was something that I know CIANJ, along with all the other business groups, opposed. Now that was off the budget, but that 2.5% is going to really come back to haunt a lot of our members that have to pay these premiums, and that's an extra cost of doing business. But then add on top of that, that if you're a C Corp in New Jersey, the governor signed a budget which raises the corporate business tax to now 11.5%. And just to give you some context, that would be the second highest in the country, behind Iowa, I believe, that's at 12%. Then there's the millionaire's tax. And people have this notion that the millionaire's tax, really, you think of an individual that earns $1 million and pays taxes, and you think of maybe Wall Street, you think of somebody that is a hedge fund investors, but a lot of people don't realize that the big majority of businesses in New Jersey, and we represent a lot of them, are these small family-owned businesses, sometimes generational, that actually have built that wealth, that have built the success of the company. They want to stay here, second, third generation. I've talked to a lot of them. And now, unfortunately, now with this millionaire's tax, CBT tax, and then all the other things that are sprinkled on top of it, they're asking that question, do we want to stay here in New Jersey? And I know, again, it's not about bashing who the governor is or anything. It's, again, think about this from a business perspective. You got to stay viable. You got to stay profitable. And unless this pandemic is declared over at some point, we thought it was about flattening the curve. Then it became, and now I think it's, people are saying, Tony, do you think it's political? Are we waiting for the election? And on that note, right, and I brought my ballot, and I just talked to a group of our CEOs today. So I'm sure everybody's received a mail-in ballot. Question is now, people don't realize this, but if you wait and go on November 3rd to your polling station, you won't be pushing that button to vote. They're going to give you a provisional ballot because they're not sure that you mailed this mail-in ballot. So we're left wondering on November 4th, are we going to wake up? Are we going to know who the winners are? And the answer at this point is not, probably not. So park that for a second, that even if this pandemic, and my heart goes out to everybody that's been impacted from a health perspective, and we've known a lot of them. A lot of our members had COVID, and unfortunately, some of them had spouses and family members die. We represent a lot of hospitals, and I've talked to CEOs, and it was really trying times, and they deserve a lot of credit. But now at the point now where, again, we go back to that threshold question, when is the pandemic going to be declared over so we can get back to normal? So if we're not going to know who the winner is on November 4th, let alone President Trump, Vice President, Biden, it's the congressional races too in New Jersey. It's also the ballot questions that are on the back, right? Controversial issue, but some of our members play in this space is the cannabis question. I just was talking to a member who said, Tony, I follow the rules. My wife and I, we read everything diligently, and I voted last week. I got my mail-in ballot, but I forgot to answer the ballot questions. So that's, I think, what's going to happen is we're going to have a mixed bag come November 4th, wondering, what's the outcome of the ballot questions? What's the outcome of the elections? And then add on top of that, I think, and we're actually having an event this week on this, is when the vaccine is out, is that going to assuage a lot of the concerns, right? Does that mean that people will take the vaccine? And again, in talking to a lot of our members, the answer is it's a mixed bag. Some people are saying, not really. They're really, it's not going to assuage any of our concerns. And others are saying, yeah, maybe that'll bring people back. So boiling this down, I know, and again, I appreciate the invitation to talk here today on the health insurance side. What you're going to see now is, again, there was a law that was recently passed, workers' compensation, that there's a rebuttable presumption that if one of your employees comes down with COVID, it happened at work. What does that mean? What does that mean to workers' comp? What does that mean to health insurance? I'm sure it's going to raise some complications and some issues. And so now, not even knowing that, whether it's the election that has to be over, whether it's the vaccine, I'm telling you that there are members that aren't going to bring their people back until next summer. And that is absolutely remarkable when you go back to March, because I'm sure even the governor, even the president, whoever you talked to back then thought this was not going to last 7 months. And if there's anything I could leave everybody with, it goes back to business needs that certainty. Business needs to know that if capital, again, one businesswoman said to me, Tony, the capital's on the sideline, wants to get in the game. It's just not sure what kind of effect it's going to have. And until that certainty comes back, it's going to be tough to really get back to any kind of normal. So hopefully I didn't go over, Frank, but in one word, I think this pandemic has been disruptive to the business community, and we hope it turns around soon.
Right. Well, Tony, thank you for your perspective and your commitment to be with us today. I have just a few questions just passed through my mind. You mentioned the election and what we're not going to have an immediate notification of what direction the company's going in politically, but more importantly, regardless of what happens with the election, I'm a little concerned with the remnants of the pandemic and whether or not the climate and the situation is going to change relative to small businesses and restaurants and stores that were closed down that were able to open up during the warm weather months, if you will, in New Jersey. And now that we're sliding back in and outdoor dining may not be available much longer in this particular time. How do you think that's going to affect businesses? And do you see a gradual number of these family-owned businesses going under as a result of the restrictions and the pandemic ramifications?
It's a good question, Frank. And the answer is some have gone under, right? Whether it's a gym, a restaurant, unfortunately, they're not going to reopen. I think the ones that are able to survive and thrive, what they're going to need. And again, not that, we're big free market, free enterprise people. We believe let the businesses thrive, innovation, everything. But I think you're going to need another stimulus from the federal government. And I think, we're going to implore the governor and the legislature to do more for businesses, whether it's grants, right? Forget about the loans. If they're forgivable loans, great, but grants are always helpful. They're going to need that kind of a push to really a boost to get them back up and going. But I can't stress enough that at the end of the day, it's important for the governor to declare this pandemic over at the right time. We just don't know what the finish line is.
Right.
What has to happen, in order for that emergency to be lifted. So then businesses could do business with each other and people can go back out. And again, it's going to be an individual thing, right? Some people, and again, we do events, right? We had a golf event. There are going to be people, you have to respect the fact they might have a vulnerable family member at home. They may be asthmatic. You know, we'll probably won't see them for a long time because of the problems. But I think it's important for the people that can do business and should do business and can come out, that we build I guess, an atmosphere where that, you know, it's okay to go out and do it safely. At the end of the day, Frank, here's the frustration. We knew this back in June, right? What was the outcome going to be from CDC and a lot of these? Until the vaccine was out, you're going to have to wear a mask. You're going to have to sanitize. You're going to have to practice social distancing. I'm happy to say that we've been doing that. A lot of our members have been doing that for months, but yet the restaurants weren't able to open, right? The gyms just opened about a month ago. And so that's the problem is keep thinking about that supply chain. Keep thinking it's not just that gym. It's the plumber, electrician, lawyer, banker. It's the supplier of the equipment. That's the appreciation that I think, and we hope that government understands. So I know it's a long-winded answer to your question, but.
Well, it was a long-winded question, so you did quite well with it. We appreciate your support of our organization. If we can help you in any way, I think the message here, because we're dealing with an unknown, is if our membership in any way can support the small business owner, the local restaurant, the local boutique, anything that we can do to generate business on a local level would be greatly appreciated by your membership. And we will do our best to do that and support your membership, and we appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thank you, Frank, and I certainly will follow up with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you.
All right, at this point, we're a little bit ahead of schedule, which is really outstanding. And if we have any additional time, we would like to provide that to Janet Troutwine, who is the CEO of the National Association of Health Underwriters in Washington, D.C. And Janet is our best friend, most knowledgeable person, and our inside track to what the hell's going on in Washington, because it's a fast-moving environment and culture and pace, and we need to know and be kept abreast of what's going on the political scene on the federal level. So we're thrilled and happy to once again have our longtime colleague and friend Janet Troutwine to give us the national perspective from NJAHU Corporate. So Janet, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Frank. I really appreciate that. And I have a few slides I'm going to run through, and I hope that we'll have time for if there are any questions that people have. So let me just go ahead and get started here. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the debate that was last night. Really quickly, we know, I think most people would agree that the first presidential debate was not great, that neither one of the candidates were presented a really stellar image of themselves. Last night's debate was more debate-like, and I think, some people are saying that that it was kind of a push as to who won. I will say that I think that a vice presidential debate often is not that important, and I'll be really honest, but this year I think it was important because of the age of the presidential candidates and the possibility that one of those two VP candidates could actually become president prematurely. So the next one coming up, I guess you probably have all heard, is October 15th, and they've said it will be virtual because of, because of the conditions of the president and the family and many of the staff members. It's just for safety purposes. I want to talk to you a little bit about polling. So I know that you all have your news sources, and I want to talk to you a little bit about whether polls matter, just quickly. I will say that a lot of the sources of your news are likely to be opinions that you're hearing of people. Even on your mainstream news networks, you've got a lot of experts who are giving their opinion about things. And I think it's really good and important for you to listen to a variety of opinions about the election and all the parts of the election. So it's not that the opinions don't matter, because a lot of them are informed, but I hope that you will also watch these polls, because the polls are mathematical and they are pretty much absent of opinions on things. And so the polls are really good predictors normally of what could happen. And as you can see, these particular polls, there are lots of polls out there. These particular ones are considered to be unbiased polls, which is why I showed you these in particular. All of them show Joe Biden up either 7 or 8 points. That can change for any number of reasons. Anything can happen in the next few days and weeks that could make that go the opposite direction. But it has been holding steady for a while, which normally during an election process, it's a little bit more roller coaster than it has been this time. So I think while you're listening to all of these opinions polls, you'll need to also mix in some probability calculations and mathematical things based on polls and the way people have voted in the past and so forth. The big issue is voter turnout. We just heard a little bit about this, but the issue is, will the turnout be high? Will there be residual fear about COVID-19 that keeps people from voting? Will it take forever because of the whole process we've created to know what the actual results of the election are? I wanted to show you this particular thing relative to voter registration, which spiked in June. And that's a pretty big spike. This is one reason I'm glad you're watching this virtually, because you can actually see this slide. And the spike is very, is evident along with in March.
Excuse me, Janet?
Yes.
We can't see the slide. We're just seeing you. We're not able to see the slide. So.
Okay, well, I shared it. Hold on.
Okay.
Hold on here, because I want you to see some of these. Hold on. Let's try this again. Now, can you see it?
Yes, now we can see it.
Okay. Thank you for telling me that.
Yeah, I didn't, I wasn't
what's
aware.
going on? So I'm going to back up, and I just want to show you this slide really quickly here. So do you see the spikes here? There was a spark in March and a spike in June. And a lot of that occurred during the time when we had all the civil unrest, which I know we're still having, but when it was right at the beginning of it, you can see that there was a big spike in registration. All of those people that registered still have to come out to vote. And particularly if they haven't voted in the past, they may or may not do that, or they have to, vote absentee and so forth. So I think this is somewhat telling. This issue of will people actually come to the polls could really skew or come to to vote, can skew these other polling numbers that we've seen. But we'll see if that really happens. And then I want to talk a little bit about the candidates' positions on healthcare, which are very, very important. So one of the things that Joe Biden has done is he's said that he is a position that we haven't seen any of the members of Congress come up with, and that is that he would like to allow Americans to buy into Medicare at the age of 60, but it is actually more like a change in eligibility. So it's not like the buy-in proposals that we've seen in Congress, which I'll show you in a moment. This is a change in eligibility with a cost associated with it. So it's a different method, and he also as all the Democrats have talked about public options. The public options proposals are each different. The thing that they all share in common is that they pay providers based on Medicare rates. And most of your medical providers would say that if all of their patients were paying medical rates, some of them would say, we're going out of business. So this is a huge issue both on access to care as well as the disruption to the market. Because as you know, our commercial plans are not allowed to mandate that a provider in their network take Medicare rates. So, and given that the healthcare itself is the biggest part of any premium dollar, it really creates an unlevel playing field. It's an exaggerated unlevel playing field. So as we look at these public option proposals, the things that you need to look for are, you know, what is the rate they're paying providers? Again, most of them are saying Medicare, and then that's a negotiating area. So if we see one of these going through Congress at just rapid pace, the first thing that you'll see us do is try to make sure that the providers are going to be paid more than Medicare rates, so that we have less market disruption that way, fewer providers closing their doors and so forth. And then the other issue is, which is really important, is on these public option proposals, Biden is suggesting that his would be in the individual market, and then it would be run entirely by CMS. So it would be also offered probably through on the federal exchange, and people would be able to get tax credits for it. So these are kind of some critical things. I'm going to show you in a minute some of the other congressional proposals, and keep in mind that no candidate, even though they have a platform for both candidates is a wish list. They may or may not be able to actually get those things done if Congress does not cooperate. You cannot do everything by executive order. So a lot of this requires congressional cooperation. So they might get something, but it's really important that we look at what Congress is talking about too, so we try to anticipate what we might actually get in the end. And then another issue is that there's been a lot of talk in the Biden campaign about negotiating prescription drug prices, which means, you know, the government doesn't negotiate, the government sets prices. So it's really would be more so than what we've done already in the Trump administration. And he's talked about establishing review boards to assess prices on non-competitive biotech drugs, which is an interesting avenue to go down, and probably some version of that. This looking at biotech drugs needs to be done. That may or may not be the right thing. He's talked about prohibiting surprise billing, which, you know, I know you've heard from us a lot about surprise billing. The method what you do about surprise billing is kind of the key thing here. And then investment in community health centers. And he's talked about other things, but these are his main health issues. On the Trump campaign has mainly continued to talk about limiting implementation of the Affordable Care Act. We all know the various things that have come through. They've used association health plans, limited duration plans, a big focus on HRAs, which is actually trying to, you know, pull people out of the main line. Their actual goal is to pull people out of the mainline system. And then we've seen some pretty stellar efforts by the Trump administration on drug pricing. They've really been more aggressive with this than any administration I've ever seen, although they have not gone as far as what Democrats are proposing. One of the things to really watch for, particularly if you do self-funded business, is this issue of rebates. They want to be really aggressive on rebates. And Alex Azar is particularly big on this, even though he pulled back a little bit from their prior regulation that they had issued regarding turning all rebates over to the individual user. For those of you that have self-funded plans that are dependent on rebates to keep the cost down, you know, in the absence of the list price going down, if the rebates went away, your costs are going to go up on your plan. And we've been in and talked with them multiple times about this, and that's one of the reasons why they backed down off of their prior regulation, because they just need to fine-tune what they want to do with that. But we would see that kind of action from either campaign relative to rebates and pharmacy benefit managers and all of that. And then President Trump is also opposed to surprise billing, although he tends to want to leave it to the courts to decide. I wanted to show you this slide really quickly. The issues for voters, normally healthcare is 3 or 4, and it's number 2 now. That's probably a lot of that has to do with COVID-19. Some people have, you know, lost their coverage that they had, or maybe they have gone on COBRA. They're concerned about it. It's pretty, it's a different voters are from the different parties are are interested in this for sometimes similar reasons and sometimes totally different reasons. So I wanted to kind of drill down on what it is about healthcare that the voters are saying, and that has to do with, a lot of it has to do with the cost, and that the biggest issue is, it isn't that they don't like what they have, they don't like what they pay for what they have. Most people don't want to disrupt the whole system, they'd rather fix what they have today. A surprising number support public option and Medicare for all, mainly because if you just ask them that question without any additional questions, then they'll tell you this. But when you start asking more questions, well, would you support it if we did this or that? Sometimes some of those people drop off. Most of them are unwilling to vote for an additional tax increase to pay for either the public option or Medicare for all. Most of the people that were polled on this believe that, this is a very recent poll from September 17th, most of these people believe that private coverage should continue to exist. So now I will say that as we look at fixes to the ACA, we really need to pay attention to what those fixes are. And we'll have a lot of proposals on that. For example, some of them have proposed, a number of them have proposed making the tax credits in the individual market significantly more generous, which they would do by basing the amount of the tax credit on a gold plan instead of a silver plan. And then they would also change the way the income limits are done. And the issue the reason I bring that particular thing up, because it's only one of a number of things that are being suggested by Democrats to improve the ACA, is that somewhere we're going to have to start paying for this stuff. You know, we've had all of this COVID-19 relief, which has been so needed, but at some point we'll have to go back to saying, how are we going to pay for this? So one of the things that we have to be really, really careful of are efforts to tamper with the tax exclusion on employer provided coverage. It's kind of an easy target for paying for lots of things like this. And we've seen proposals that would pay for these increased tax credits by capping the tax exclusion to a certain extent. I want to go back just for a moment. I mentioned the public option. I'm not going to talk about Medicare for all. You know, the Biden camp is not in favor of Medicare for all, and it would be very difficult for them to pass, but they might be able to get some version of a public option through. So remember, they have what they're proposing in their platform, but we also have this issue of what Congress has already been proposing. So they've had these Medicare buy-in proposals, which are different than what Biden said about changing the eligibility of Medicare. That's, and the two bills are different from each other. The Senate bill is more generous and less punitive than the House version of the bill. None of you would like the House version at all. And we really don't like either version, but the House version is much worse. And then we have Medicare X, which is probably the most popular public option that people have signed on to. The thing of not to like about it, other than the obvious thing about the market disruption with paying providers different prices, is that it would go into the small employer market. The other thing that I really, really don't like about it is it has a provision in it that says to providers, you don't have to be a provider for our public option, but if you're not a provider for the public option, then you will also not be able to participate in the Medicare system at all, which means that it would change the number of providers that are participating, and it would cause the program to expand. And then the worst public option proposal is Medicare E, because it expands also to the large employer market, and it creates modified community rating in the large employer market. And then we have a Medicaid buy-in, and we also are seeing state proposals in this regard. So what actually would go through Congress that would be proposed is probably they're going to have to reintroduce all of this legislation, and we'll see which ones kind of prevail, or whether if Joe Biden tried to push through his version early on, like in the first 100 days, whether that would be a proposal that would prevail instead. Of all of these proposals, the Biden proposal is the least unattractive. We don't like any of them, but in the overall order of which ones are worse. All of these are worse than what he proposed in his campaign. And then just on surprise billing, just a reminder that both candidates have said that they are in favor of this, but with that we do have legislation and that Congress has been working on it. And this issue of how you fix it is very, very key. And it's been the reason why we haven't passed anything yet, given bipartisan support, is that they cannot agree on what the remedy is to do about surprise billing. So how do you fix that? There's two main ways to do that. One of them is to create this median network rate, which is kind of a benchmarked rate, and that's what the out-of-network provider pays. That's probably the easiest for an employer, particularly a self-funded employer. And the worst for a self-funded employer is arbitration, which is more expensive and less predictable. I think that what we're going to actually end up with is a mixture of these two, where we'll have some sort of a median rate that will go up to a certain dollar amount of money. And then if the amount of money being considered is over a certain level, then arbitration would kick in. But we can't predict that for sure. I mentioned the tax exclusion. I think this is really something to watch. It's something that you never see in the news, but the issue of how you pay for whatever the proposal is, you've just got to know where are the big pockets of money that they're likely to come after, and this is one of them. The potential lost revenue to the federal government because we don't tax the benefits that people receive from their employers, the health benefits and others, is a lot of money. It's hundreds of billions of dollars every year. So to think that someone might come after part of it is pretty critical. And if you think what would happen to your young, healthy employees if they realize that by accepting their employers, particularly with no individual mandate, so they accept their employer's offer of coverage, but it results in a tax consequence for them. The first ones that are going to drop out are the people that you want to stay in your group to balance the overall stability of your group. So it's really important. Well, we've always been very loud on this issue, and we would continue to be if that's proposed. And again, I have seen some moderate proposals, particularly from the Urban Institute, which is normally has pretty good ideas most of the time. They've proposed capping the exclusion. We've been in a friendly argument with them about this for a long time. And I want to talk about the Electoral College because I'm going to show you a couple of things coming up that I think are really pretty important. But I want to make sure everyone understands the Electoral College. It's 538 individuals, most of them appointed by political parties. It is possible, as you know, for a candidate to lose the popular vote and win the Electoral College votes. This happened to both George W. Bush in 2000 and Donald Trump in 2016. And we have an indirect election process for our democracy, which is different. So it's kind of a nuance for people that are political junkies, but there are different kinds of democracies. And so we are an indirect, and that means it's because we're not just basing everything on the popular vote. What this does, though, is protects smaller states from being just mowed down by states like California and so forth, and others where there's a big block of where the population is really large, and it allows more of a say in who is elected the president. But there's a lot of different opinion about whether the Electoral College still works for the United States. We have lots of different opinions about that. So the reason I mentioned the Electoral College, I want you to look at the latest map here. If you came to convention, the map looked different. Now I want to show you the most recent one. And the most recent one says that we have 72 toss-up votes on the Electoral College. You know, blue is Democrat votes, red is Republican votes. If it's pink color, that means we have a state that has both. And so they're less solid Republican, for example. So the Republicans have a big stretch, and this is all based on math and probability calculations, not opinions. This is why it's important to look at these projections. These are done by the Charlie Cook group. So Republicans would have to pretty much get all of the toss-ups and then move some on the other side in order to win. That doesn't mean that they can't do that. And Donald Trump could still win. And things can change based on stuff that happens right up to the last minute of the election. But if you look straight at the math, it's going to be difficult for that to occur. So sometimes you need to have a balanced viewpoint. And the reason I show this to you is this won't be the only presidential election we ever have. I'm saying this is how it works. It's based on when they make these predictions, they say which is more likely to happen? Is it more likely that the Republicans are going to get to the magic number 270 by going back in and getting some of the numbers that are already declared pretty much Democrat votes? Or is it easier for Democrats to win who already have more than they need? And this is what will be the critical thing to watch. It's possible that we could even end up with a tie, in which case the House votes to break the tie. This wouldn't occur until after the new Congress is sworn in on January 3rd. And then quickly on the House, we have most people are predicting the House will stay in Democrat control. There are 232 Democrats and 198 Republicans. Currently, we have 4 vacancies from retirements and primarily, and we have 1 libertarian in the House. And then there are 28 toss-up seats. So as you look at how they're spread out likely and so forth, we have 28 toss-ups. So the Republicans would have to get, in order to take over the House, they'd have to get all those toss-ups and then some from the other side. It takes 218 to win. So it's most of the predictions are that that's not going to happen. And it would be difficult for that to happen. Most are saying that Democrats will remain in control. The Senate is a different matter. We have currently 53 Republicans and 47 Democrats. Only 1/3 of the Senate is up for election each 2-year period. So we have 35 seats that are up for election right now. 25 of those are Democrat seats. 23 are Republican seats. So Democrats need 4 seats to win. And the point, I guess, I've talked about this with you before, in the Senate, things don't pass by simple majority, except for a few measures. One of the things that passes by simple majority are judicial seats, which we'll talk about in a second. And the other thing are reconciliation measures, which is how we got the ACA and so forth. But most of the predictors are kind of saying that it's difficult for them to predict who's going to win. There are only 6 toss-up seats. And even if Democrats win, it's such a narrow majority that most measures that aren't one of those I just named need a supermajority of 60 votes to get past things like filibuster and parliamentary holds and things like that. So anything controversial, unless one of the parties has a huge majority, it's really hard to get it through. And you might say, well, if I only need 60 votes and I've got, let's say the Democrats have 51, you say, well, wouldn't it be so easy to go and get those 9 votes from Republicans? No, it isn't easy at all. You might get 1 or 2 maximum, maybe. And so it's really hard. Things are extremely partisan, and it's really hard for them to get votes on anything that's not, clearly an issue that they need to vote yes on. So it will still be difficult to get things done the same way that today Mitch McConnell has difficulty getting things done because his majority is very narrow. So it's really hard that's why things get stuck in the Senate. Now, having said that, this whole process was designed so that things would slow down in the Senate. The Senate was designed by our founding fathers to be a more deliberate body than the House, where things barrel through the House with a simple majority. That doesn't happen in the Senate. It's not supposed to. But I don't think that anyone ever intended that it would be bogged down this much. And there used to be a lot more bipartisan working than there is today. So I know we've all been hearing just almost nonstop about the Supreme Court and what's going on. So I wanted to talk for a few minutes about this. I want to talk about Texas v. US. There are a lot of issues before the Supreme Court that we're not going to get into, but I do want to talk about the issue that has the potential to bring down the ACA altogether. So we have this coalition led by Texas with 18 Republican states, a couple of individuals as well, that maintained that the ACA should be declared unconstitutional and invalid because of the fact that the individual mandate, which was the linchpin to making things like guaranteed issue, no pre-existing conditions, and so forth work. The issue is, when we take that penalty out, does the rest of it go with it? So there's this question about whether you can separate it out or not. We've had a district court has named that this is that it does invalidate the whole ACA. A couple of courts have. So that we have, the issue is, what will the Supreme Court do? And now it's at the Supreme Court to make this decision. So what does that have to do with our potential new justice? So President Trump has nominated Amy Coney Barrett to replace the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And this would if she is approved, which she likely will be at some point, it would change the balance of the court to 5-4 in favor of more conservative viewpoints. And she has said that she believes that the ACA is unconstitutional. She's already said that publicly. So we kind of know how she might vote on that. But here's the timetable that is the most important thing. The Senate is supposed to vote on all of this on October 21st. Of course, this could be delayed because of coronavirus and them not being able to come and vote in person, which it has to be. Anytime the vote can be decided by one vote, and it is, of course, that close, then the voting has to be in person. Now, so this issue of whether or not she's elected or she's approved, because I'm sure, given that they don't need a supermajority, she's going to be approved, but they've got to have everybody there to vote in person. The arguments on Texas versus United States are going to be heard on November 10th. So she would have to be approved before then. So it could even run after the election, but it has to be when Congress is actually there, and it has to be done by November 10th so that she could actually be seated to hear the arguments. And if she were not seated by then, let's say that her approval didn't go through until November 15th, then she would still be a justice, but she would have to be recused on this particular case, which would mean it's anybody's guess what would happen with the final decision, which the court would announce. It would be unlikely for it to happen before June. So that's kind of the timetable on that. It does make for an interesting thought process. We have members of Congress who are working on, various things that would take care of this. We saw President Trump issue an executive order about pre-existing conditions. It does not have the weight of law. I will tell you, there's no regulations associated with it. So it's more of a statement than anything else. That's not true of all the executive orders. It's just so new that it hasn't gone through the regulatory process yet. And Frank, that's all I have. I don't even know if we have time for questions. It looks like I ran up to the end. You can decide that.
Well, I will take the liberty of doing that. Of course, our mutual and distinguished colleague, Dave Mordo, would like to pose a question to you, saying, can the progressives in the Democratic Party pressure Biden to move to Medicare for all?
Well, no, not unless some things happen. Here's what I'm worried about. I am worried about the Supreme Court decision, because if it results in total market disruption, because the things that are planned to occur kind of fall through, so that the market sort of collapse, either all at once or just sort of like a, a domino effect. Then anyone that might say, well, look, we've proven that the private market doesn't work. That's your biggest opening for Medicare for all, because otherwise it's too expensive. And Biden is a huge ACA supporter, huge. That was, the shining star of the Obama administration. He takes great personal pride in the ACA. So it would take a market collapse for him to be, to espouse Medicare for all.
Okay, one other question came in from a panelist. How likely is it that Justice Barrett would voluntarily recuse herself where appropriate?
I don't think she would recuse herself if she's seated by then, not on this one. It's too big. It's too big an issue. She might do it on other issues, but there are a lot of issues that have been talked about associated, with her nomination. But the one that we really are focused on here, because it so directly affects all of us, is the ACA. I don't think she would recuse herself. I doubt it. I think that it's too much of an opportunity. One of the biggest cases in history, maybe, right?
Right. Well, is there anything else you'd like to add or you'd like to address relative to our association here in New Jersey? I think perhaps you should talk about membership. We have almost 200 people participating in this event. Some are members, some are not. I think the ones that are not can now we've demonstrated the value of being a member, to have access to someone like yourself to provide up to the minute data relative to the election, legislation, prognostication as it relates to our industry and our livelihood. So I'm going to give you the floor to give us a commercial of why those people should maintain their membership, and more importantly, those should join.
Well, I will say that the reason why people are members of NEHU differs. And I will tell you that I think that there's so many things that we provide our members, but what we've just been talking about, if we did nothing else but represent you on Capitol Hill and with the administration, that alone would be worth your membership dollar. That one thing. Because I know how hard we work on this every single day. And believe me, it's not something you could replicate on your own. So if you like the business that you're in, I suggest that you be a member. We are almost 100% dues run. We depend on dues. And it's time for everyone to be a part of supporting your job, the industry that you're in, your profession. This is a profession. And I can tell you that no physician or attorney would think of not belonging to their professional association. And you should view yourself in the same way. This is your professional association, and we need your support to get these things done. They aren't free. It's expensive for us to get these things done. We also have so much going on in the professional development department, and things that we're offering new every day, and compliance services. Even the ability to ask a question you have about a client you have free and get an answer back that's reviewed by an ERISA attorney just from being a member. That one thing by itself too there is worth your membership. When we combine it all together, I don't know how anyone cannot be a member. And the last thing I'll say, Frank, is that if a person says, well, my agency is a member, I would say, really? Or if you're not a member, you're not a member. So you're someone else in your agency, and you is two different things. So we need each and every person to be a member. Each and every person. And I implore you that this could not be a more important time.
Yes.
Regardless of the election outcome, either outcome of the presidential election creates some issues, either outcome.
Yes.
And we have a lot on our plates. This is not the time to not be a member. We need all of you as members. So those of you that aren't yet, please take care of that while you're not in person at your meeting. take care of that right away. Do it online, and you can come to NAHU.org and you can join. And when you join, you'll also be joining the New Jersey Association.
Thank you so much, Janet. We can't thank you enough for your perspective, your knowledge, your expertise. And it's great to see you. Be well, be safe, and hopefully we'll get together at the conference in February. Fingers crossed. In January or February.
Just to let you know, our conference in February, we've already decided it's going to have to be virtual because of safety concerns.
Okay.
We are going to make it the things we have planned. You will enjoy the meeting the way it's set up. It will be very interesting and useful to you. Hopefully when we have our conference in New Orleans in June, then we'll all be together again for those of you that attend those. So,
okay, I'll see you on Bourbon Street.
All right. See you there. Thank you.
Thanks again, Janet. Appreciate it so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. That was Janet Troutwine, CEO of NJAHU. At this point, I'd like to introduce Ward Sanders, President of the New Jersey Association of Health Plans. Ward is a longtime friend of our association and a distinguished colleague of ours who's worked tirelessly on our behalf on multiple levels. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Ward for him to give us the state's perspective on what's going on. So Ward, welcome. Thank you for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Frank. Can you hear me okay? All good? All good, thumbs up. Okay, well, thanks for the kind introduction. I think this is your 12th State of the State, and I've spoken just about every one of these. I think I may have missed one or two because of scheduling issues. You would keep inviting me back, so it just goes to show there's no accounting for taste. I did see the lineup, though, and you've got a really great group of speakers. I've heard Janet a couple of times, and boy, she does a terrific job. She's a very insightful commentator on healthcare, and especially at the national stage. So I'm going to try to give you a sense at the state stage, some of the key issues. I did want to also just echo the comments from Ms. Troutwine about the work of the health underwriters. You know, you guys really do a terrific job for your members, as well as for the residents of the state. You should be proud of your trade organization. So keep up the good work. And if those of you of the 200 or so of you, if you're not a member, you really should think about membership, because this is a good group that does some great work. I did want to say too, if a fly lands on me, Frank, if you could give me a thumbs up to let me know about that, I'll try to make sure that that doesn't happen. I will also pledge to you, I'm going to do a better job of answering questions posed than both the vice presidential candidates last night. It didn't seem like either of them answered any of the questions directly, but maybe that's a mark of a good debater. So the folks at NJAHU were nice enough to tee up some interesting questions for me. So let me, I'll start with those, and then if we have time, I can venture off into a couple other areas. So the first question was about, and I think Ms. Troutwine may have addressed a little of this too, does the threat of the elimination of the employer exclusion concern me? And do you think that a lot of employers would simply abandon offering benefits to their employees if they could not receive a business deduction for their premium? So, you know, as all of you know, based, you know, because of your work, but just to restate this, you know, employer paid premiums for health insurance are exempt under federal income and payroll taxes. And the portion of premiums that the employees pay is typically excluded from taxable income. So the exclusion of premiums lowers most workers' tax bills and creates sort of an after-tax, you know, sort of savings. You know, I don't think there's any question that the elimination of those tax advantages would cause some employers to drop coverage. And I think it's especially true if there's an attractive individual marketplace. Probably more attractive for folks with wages below 400% of the federal poverty limit. So just to give you a sense, 400% of the federal poverty limit, I think for a family of four is somewhere around 103 or 4,000 indexed to inflation. And the individual market is really pretty expensive above 400% where there is no subsidy available. So I think that the dynamics may change a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Oops,
I
there we go. So some critics have argued the exclusion fuels the growth of the cost of healthcare. That was why in the ACA, I believe that the Cadillac tax, which never really got off the ground, but that was meant to address this, but that provision was repealed. I do think on this issue that the COVID experience has exposed the vulnerabilities of employer-based model for healthcare coverage. I think that that's real. The state has focused on the viability and affordability of the individual market with a reinsurance mechanism, a shift to a state-based exchange, state subsidies. But again, for folks above 400%, it's still quite expensive. So anyway, I do think that it is a danger to employer-based coverage, and I think that some segment of the community would definitely, of the employer community, would shift. Okay, let me move on to the second question, and this one I think is an easy one. What do you think about the idea of insurance carriers being able to carve out prescription benefits in the fully insured small group market? So I think that there's an easy answer to this, which is that you can't do that for insured products. So the ACA mandates coverage in the insured small group market for all 10 essential health benefits, of which one of them is prescription drug coverage. My understanding anyway is that only pediatric dental coverage may be carved out. So this would require a federal law change as well as a state law change. And I just don't see either of those things happening. It does speak to an underlying problem, and that's the high cost of prescription drug coverage. A lot of larger employers, the state, for example, breaks out coverage for prescription drugs and does it through a different vendor than their health insurer. But whether we would see that in the small group market, that really would require some changes in the law. Self-funded employers or self-funded MIWAs would be able to carve out prescription drugs, whether there's an interest in doing so or the economics make it a good idea. I'm not quite sure. Okay, question 3. Have you seen the role of the broker become more vital since the ACA was enacted, and are brokers still the best distribution outlets for carriers to market their products? Mindful that I am speaking to a group of brokers, there is no way I would say no to those questions. I would never argue that you're superfluous or unnecessary. Especially not to your face and not behind your back either. So I think that the reality here is that these are really complicated products. As much as folks try to make health insurance coverage simpler, it just can't be. It's just the very nature of it. It makes it very hard. So you've got tiered benefits, maximum out of pockets, deductibles that vary by service. So I just think that purchasers are well served by the brokerage system, where you have, as Ms. Troutwine noted, that you are professionals and you're trained and licensed to guide purchasers, and for good reason. Those licensure requirements exist. I just see the role of the broker becoming more vital because products are becoming more complicated over time, and it shows a history of working. Just as an example, I consider myself a fairly sophisticated purchaser of health coverage and pretty knowledgeable. I use a broker for our trade association, and I find it, enormously helpful. I don't have the time or the wherewithal to shop in a way that helps me like the broker can help me. And I guess the other part of this is that brokers also have a continuing service relationship with their members, so that it's not bad to have an advocate on coverage issues and helping folks navigate their healthcare products. So rest assured, I think that there is a continued role, and a lot of folks recognize that. The next question that folks asked was, do you see an ongoing role for the New Jersey Mandated Health Benefits Advisory Commission? And do you think it's made a positive impact on the cost of health insurance and health coverage since it was formed? So I'm going to suspect anyway that some of you aren't aware of that entity. So let me just take a second to describe what it is and what it does. So back in the early 2000s, I think it was 2004, 2006, the legislature established this commission, and it tasked it with responding to requests from the legislature to provide objective, independent analysis of the medical, financial, and social impacts of a proposed health insurance mandate benefit. So when they're proposing a bill that says you have to add coverage for X, Y, or Z, that's the kind of bill that would could be referred to the commission. There is a separate commission called the Pension and Health Benefits Review Commission, which looks at mandates that are applicable to the public employee programs, like the state health benefits program. So the Mandate Commission has suffered some confusion with this Pension Commission. The Pension Commission opines on whether a bill should be enacted or not, and almost always says it should not, and says it should be up to collective bargaining. So, so some folks legislators thought of the Mandate Commission as a place that you would waylay a bill for a referral that would come back negative. That's just simply not the case. But I think it's because of some of this confusion. So the Mandate Commission is composed of some member volunteers. I sit on it. There's state officials, doctors, nurses, employers, health insurers, academics, and some more. I do want to shout out to Dr. Don Labrizzi, who has served as the chair for quite some time for herding this group. He it really does, in addition to a fantastic superstar doctor, he does a great job with this group. They've done about 14 studies, I think I counted, and they don't recommend to enact or not to enact. They just focus on the impact of the legislation. Their utility is dependent on whether the legislature make referrals, but not all mandate bills have been referred. And this has been the frustration of the commission and sort of a challenge here. But the chair of the standing committee is tasked with referring bills to go over to the Mandate Commission. Without a referral, the commission can't do a report. So some mandates have not gone through this process, others have. I will say Assemblyman Weber and the Financial Institutions and Insurance Committee has been really vocal about making sure that this law is followed. And we've seen an uptick in the, Speaker Coughlin has been good about referring these bills of late. So that's been helpful. So my observation is that this is a really good thing. The reports develop a deeper understanding of the impact of the legislation and help inform the legislators without telling them what to do. So I think it will be successful if it's allowed to be successful and the legislature pursues their guidance. I'll give you one example or two examples to show you kind of how they view this. One was a recent referral for juvenile depression screening. The report came back very positive. The U.S. Preventive Services Task Force has rated this with a B rating, so they've really suggested that this is a good idea. So the Commission didn't say enact, but they really suggested that it's a good idea. There was, so I'll just leave it at that. I think it's a good forum to understand for legislators the value and the importance of some of these mandates. The next question folks asked was, do you find the average consumer knows more or less about health insurance than they did before the ACA? And are people better consumers because of the ACA? And are they taking better care of themselves? I'm going to suggest that you all know better than I do, as you have a closer relationship with consumers. But I would note that these products are complicated and getting more complicated as time moves on. So this is hard for consumers. I think the carriers and brokers and state officials are really becoming more focused on consumerism in healthcare. And so, there's a lot of efforts to improve healthcare literacy. I do think that as it becomes more central to people's lives and more central to political discourse, that there is an improvement in the understanding of how healthcare works. Next question. Do you think pediatric dental and vision is a ridiculous essential health benefit? So I would suggest that this is a slightly inflammatory and leading question. But let me just say this, that I think for children and parents with dental and vision needs, obviously they don't view this as ridiculous. Dental problems can lead to all sorts of healthcare challenges, and there's really sound public policy reasons for inclusion. But it does raise this issue and a reminder that we develop products, whether it's the plans or the state guiding the plans, a balance needs to be struck between the breadth of coverage and the cost. Everyone would love a plan that covers everything with no cost sharing and no utilization management, and no one would be able to afford that. We learned a lot from the auto insurance market years ago that too much regulation can actually limit access. So I do think that there is some balancing that needs to be done. New Jersey, I thought of as having, really comprehensive coverage pre-ACA. This is, so I'll leave it at there, but I do think there is an argument for it to be made. So the next question was about Texas v. United States, and I thought that Ms. Troutline did a really good job of outlining it. I'll just touch on a couple other things. I was asked too, is what's the backup plan? Is it the next move to single payer? Just as a reminder, the Texas case really raises three legal questions. The first relates to standing. Do the red states, I forget how many there were, and individual consumers have legal standing to challenge the law. So that's sort of a procedural issue as to whether it's properly before the court. The second issue is whether Congress, when it amended the ACA and rendered and modified the tax penalty by zeroing it out, whether they've rendered the insurance mandate unconstitutional. Or whether that provision has made the law unconstitutional. And then the third question is, and this will probably go to the remedies, is whether the mandate was so intertwined with the rest of the law or certain portions of the law that some of those provisions must be struck down. So, it's interesting. I think that there's kind of a general sense of, the options for the court that are before it and how it resolve it. I'll leave to the folks that follow the Supreme Court of law. It looks like they have maybe 5 kind of options. One is to dismiss the case on technical grounds, leaving the statute in place. The second is to affirmatively uphold the ACA. The third would be to uphold the law, but find the individual mandate to be void without its penalty, but essentially maintain the status quo. The fourth would be to uphold the statute, but void the individual mandate and other provisions closely linked to the mandate. So probably guarantee issue, pre-ex rules, and so forth. And then the last would be to strike down the law in full. I suspect if they did that, there would be massive chaos. They probably would delay the implementation of that to allow, just think about this in New Jersey. I think we've added, 500,000 people in Medicaid and probably another 200,000 in the individual market. I can't imagine that they would have an immediate impact and say that those plans are null and void. The question then was about Medicare for all. And I'm always reminded of Senator Klobuchar during the Democratic debates. She was not a proponent of Medicare for all. And she said, how are we going to pass Medicare for all? Because 2/3 of the Democrats in the U.S. Senate caucus are not on the Medicare for all bill. She said, if you can't get, 2/3 of the Democrats behind the legislation, it's not likely to pass. I don't see a shift to Medicare for all. it would be a enormous change in how healthcare is provided. And I do agree with Ms. Trautwein's observation that the president is a huge proponent, or the Vice President Biden is a huge proponent of the Affordable Care Act. If you remember during the signing legislation, he whispered in the president's ear, you know, this is a big deal, with a little bit more color than that. Okay, surprise billing legislation. Okay, bumping up to my time here, pretty close. But has this prime billing legislation been successful, and are consumers seeing less balanced billing from providers? I think the answer depends on your perspective. You know, remember, the scope of this bill is the insured markets, about 1.5 million New Jersey residents and individual, small group, large group insured plans, the state health benefits program, and an opt-in ability for self-funded employers. Adobe has a great website that has information about this, including a report. Opt-ins from self-funded employers was 67 as of January of 20. I think for consumers, the answer is absolutely yes. This has taken them out of the middle of payment disputes, and this is the most important part of the law. And it's the easiest politically. Everyone agrees that consumers should not be in the middle of these payment disputes. The challenge is, and why it took 10 years for passage in New Jersey and why we don't have a federal law yet related to this, is the hard corollary to that is that if the consumer is insulated from balanced billing, how do you determine what a fair price is in the of market forces? So I would commend you to look at the Adobe report online. They have some data on this. It does suggest that this has been has reduced overall costs for involuntary out-of-network services, and sort of breaks it down by marketplace. I see it's 11:09. I think I'm supposed to go to 11:10. I did see my friend Commissioner Creede. I did want to say that and to commend the department at the risk of some shameless pandering with her on the line here. But the state-based exchange is something that we were a proponent of during the Christie administration. We were in favor of Medicaid expansion and a creation of a state-based exchange. The governor proceeded, Governor Christie proceeded with the Medicaid expansion, but not a state-based exchange. Thank goodness he did, because a lot of states crashed and burned on their development of state-based exchange. It was complicated then. It's a lot easier now, but I can't understate the enormous complexity of this. And Commissioner Creede and her folks have been really tremendous as partners in trying to roll out a state-based exchange here in New Jersey. So we have routine meetings with them to roll this out, and hopefully this will be a smashing success. It does give the states a lot more flexibility. I think the open enrollment period is going to be doubled in duration. I also think that the state's going to be able to do this more cheaply than we were paying the Fed. So we get to keep those dollars rather than sending them to DC. So kudos to the commissioner and her folks. With that, Frank, I think I bumped up against my time here.
Well, Ward, that was a tremendous segue and made my life a little easier here.
There you go.
But we truly appreciate your support and your annual participation with our event, because we thoroughly enjoy and respect your role in the state, and you have a lot of friends with our organization and the carriers that we represent. We do lean on you for your perspective quite a bit. We appreciate it. And we also appreciate you working closely with the DOBI Commissioner, Marlene Caridi, which I'd like to introduce now at this point. If we can allow Marlene to join our group. We are very pleased to see you and have you here live. You're part of a star-studded event that we're hosting today, and we greatly appreciate the time that you're spending with us.
Thank you, Frank. I appreciate being invited back again. It's always good to share what we at the department are doing with you and your organization. And Ward, of course, old friend of mine from my assembly days. You can pander to me anytime you want, Ward. I don't know if you'll get anything out of it, but you can pander anytime. Always appreciate our friendship And as Ward said, it's a partnership. We've taken on a partnership with the carriers, and just like we're looking to take a partnership with your organization and all of the brokers and agents. So with that, let me just start. Good morning, everyone. It's been a while since I was last here, and I have to say that during that time period, our country and our state are now facing some challenging times, making our job in government, and definitely yours, all the more important. I think the first time I was with all of you was in 2018, and when I had attended the event, I spoke about our focus of improving access to health coverage and to health care. I can definitely tell you that back in 18, I never would have imagined that I would be here today talking to you all as we face the most serious public health emergency in our lifetime, at least my lifetime. I think that there's no more of an important time than now to undertake the work that we are doing and that we will be doing with your help. New Jersey is one of 2 states, as Ward had mentioned, that we are transitioning into our own state base, our marketplace, and that will begin on November 1st. Over the last several years, and as many of you are well aware, the department has been creating a foundation of improving access to the coverage and to stabilize our health insurance market. We created the reinsurance program. The state then established the requirement to have coverage, and this combination helped us lower rates by 22% compared to what they would have otherwise have been. We now are establishing our own health insurance marketplace, and it has consumed my life, but it's such a good cause and it's so important. And I think that it's a positive for New Jersey. We're calling our marketplace Get Covered New Jersey. And as a result of the exchange, our department has also grown in that we now have a new division within the Department of Banking and Insurance, and that new division is the exchange. Having our own marketplace means that New Jersey residents will no longer be using healthcare.gov. Instead, they will be going to getcovered.nj.gov to shop for and enroll for their coverage this year. I have always said, and I personally believe that having our own marketplace allows us to respond better to the needs of our New Jersey residents. Beginning this open enrollment period, which is November 1st, there will be more financial help than ever before for New Jersey residents shopping for health coverage because of the new law that was recently signed by our governor, making state subsidies available for the very first time. The marketplace, as Ward had mentioned, is a much longer period this year and moving forward. The open enrollment period will begin November 1st and will run through January 31st of 2021. So we're doubling the amount of time that residents have to enroll in coverage that they had in recent years. And I find that this will also benefit in the sense that open enrollment falls during the holidays. You have Thanksgiving, you have Christmas, you have a lot of different celebrations during those months. And I think that because we've extended it through January, we now have the opportunity for residents to say, okay, holidays are over, let me concentrate on me and my health situation and that of my family. So that extra month, I think it's really important because I think we tend to forget about our own health issues during the holidays. We have and we will continue to invest in partnering with our agents and our brokers, as well as community organizations to help ensure that our residents get the coverage that they deserve and that they need. I know that all of you have invested in this work and in providing quality, affordable coverage to the New Jersey residents. In order for our state and for the exchange to be successful and for the enrollment of our residents to be successful, you need to be successful. So how do we help our residents together? If you previously took training and received the certification through the federal marketplace, you should now have started or be starting to train with Get Covered New Jersey to be prepared for certification later this month to assist residents on the state marketplace. If you have not started the process or did not previously assist with marketplace coverage, we need your assistance. We encourage all of you to join us in helping New Jersey residents at this critical and crucial time. You can go onto our website, getcovered.nj.gov, and you can find more information under the menu for assisters and brokers. Our new enrollment platform will provide a tab that will read Find Local Assistance. That tool will allow consumers to search for certified agents and brokers by zip code or by name, and to connect them through the platform. The fact is, we need everyone working together in partnership to assist our residents and to make a success of the exchange. As I mentioned before, I've never thought that we would be looking or discussing healthcare under a public health emergency. COVID-19 has been cruel, causing many to lose their employment, as well as their health insurance coverage, as well as critically impacting them health-wise. We need brokers and agents assisting with this work beginning on November 1st for the 3 months of open enrollment ending on January 31st and then beyond. We are being asked right now, I've had questions asked as to what are our expectations of enrollment this year, being that it's going to be our first year with the state-based exchange. Truthfully, in these unprecedented times and in the environment that we are living in, things, you know, an environment that we haven't seen before, my goal is very simple: to ensure that our residents in need of health insurance get coverage, whether through a qualified health plan, through the marketplace, or through New Jersey Family Care. And let's remember that this year, more residents will probably qualify for financial help. As a department, we have done a lot of work to stabilize the individual market, but we recognize, and I particularly recognize, the importance of ensuring our small employer market and making sure that it's strong. For these reasons, the department has commissioned an actuarial study to examine options to bolster this market. In the meantime, we continue to enforce market rules and advise the industry of the relevant rules regarding associated health plans and non-ACA compliant plans, such as short-term limited duration plans, in order to reduce the negative impact that these types of plans can have on the small group market. Non-ACA compliant plans are not what consumers would expect from a health insurance plan. Oftentimes, people are denied coverage for pre-existing conditions or are surprised by a bill they expected would have been covered. New Jersey has had a long rule in place protecting against these types of plans, which I believe is even more critical during this pandemic. As we gear up for open enrollment, we are responding to the needs of residents in various ways. And as many of you know, early on, through the leadership of the governor, we developed, at the department, we required health insurance carriers in the state to waive all cost sharing for COVID screening and testing. As Ward said, we've become more focused on the consumer. And I think that during this pandemic, it's important that we remember the consumer. We also required carriers to provide a grace period for premium payments for those who were struggling to make ends meet. I have to say, the carriers have been a great partner during this time, and I thank them for the work that they have done to try to make a consumer's life a little better during this pandemic. We continue to work to assist our consumers, and we know that there's much more that needs to be done. But I know that the success of this state-based exchange will lie in the hands of our carriers, the work that Dobie has done, the administration, and of course the work that brokers and agents will do. You are on the ground. You are talking to our consumers. We believe that it's imperative that, that you're out there providing the consumer the information that they deserve and that they need to pick the right plan for them, and to make sure that they qualify for the financial assistance this year. I know I can depend on all of you to be part of this effort, and I look forward to the work we can do together to help our New Jersey residents and to help our state. So I want to thank all of you for having me here this morning. I know that there were some questions that were sent to me, Frank. Do I have time to respond to a couple of them?
Well, what I'd like to do is just reiterate the fact that our organization shares the same belief that you do, in that we're a critical component of communicating and helping ensure the residents of New Jersey, whether it be on an individual basis or a small business market basis. We also know that the pandemic has had a big impact on many people's lives in various different ways. One from a pure medical and health condition, one from an economical position, and one from a business owner standpoint. So we'd like to offer our assistance by allowing maybe having continue to have open dialogue so we can help you with what we're hearing on the street, what we're experiencing, and maybe there's an opportunity where there's certain regulations for small business owners in order to maintain a certain level of participation to access those plans, that we may have a dialogue to maybe open that up a little bit due to the pandemic, and we welcome that opportunity.
Absolutely, Frank. You know, one of the things that I'm very proud of, I carried over from my days in the assembly was an open door policy, and I carried it over into Dobie, and you are more than welcome to reach out to me, and we can have this discussion as to how we can make sure that all of our consumers, and I just don't mean on the individual market, but our businesses, and having been a small business owner, I know the struggle. So all the information that you have, because you and your folks, you're on the ground, you're hearing it firsthand. So any information that you have to help us, especially to help the small group, is important to us. Again, we recognize at Dobie the importance of the small group, and we've seen how it's diminished in numbers, and that's a concern. We're really proud and excited about the state-based exchange, and we've worked really hard to stabilize the individual market. We need to now work on stabilizing and improving our small group, and that takes partnership, and that takes open dialogue with the folks on the ground, and that's where you and your members come in.
Well, that's great. We appreciate the fact that you would welcome us in a collaborative effort, because we have the same interests in making sure that we maintain coverage for individuals and groups that participate in their small group employer marketplace. And that's our job and our livelihood, and we're passionate about it. And we're really passionate to have the presence of you and your influence and your knowledge with us today. So I want to thank you, and we will continue our dialogue as we move forward.
Thank you, Frank. And just one last thing to all of your members, if you have not signed on for the training, please do so. Our success is based on your success, and we need your help. Frank, thank you for having me, and to everyone, have a great morning and a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. We appreciate it. Now, we transition from one commissioner to another, and at this moment, we would like to introduce the Commissioner, the New Jersey State Department of Health, and shall I say, she needs no introduction. And this is our very own Judy Persichelli, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, and it's great to be with all of you today. Thanks for the invitation. I know this year's symposium is different from previous years for many reasons. But obviously the biggest reason is the uncertainty we are all facing during this pandemic. When I became health commissioner just a little bit over a year ago, I knew that I would confront some challenges, but I never imagined that I would be at the governor's side, leading the state through the most challenging public health crisis we've ever seen in our lifetime. It's been over 7 months since we had our first case, and it's a journey we are still on with a trajectory, quite frankly, that is still evolving. COVID-19 has confronted all of us with a challenge of a lifetime and has impacted every aspect of our lives: how we work, how we interact with family and friends, how we go about our everyday living, how we go to school, and how we travel. We face not only a medical challenge, but a disruption of international supply chains of personal protective equipment and life-saving equipment like ventilators. Adequate medical staffing was a problem, sufficient testing in the beginning, whether we had enough hospital beds, whether we could handle what was confronting us, and being able to care for our most vulnerable and fragile residents. In expectation of the predicted surge, hospitals doubled in March their critical care capacity, and the department worked with the federal government, the Army Corps, to set up field medical stations. And we opened closed hospitals and closed wings in hospitals to provide additional space for the anticipated surge. Since then, hospitalizations have decreased. We've been able to collapse the field medical stations, but they are in storage and ready to be used if we need them for a second surge. As part of the response, the state also undertook an unrelenting search for personal private equipment and ventilators, from the White House Strategic National Stockpile to third-party vendors. The New Jersey State Police and the Department of Health were literally moving ventilators in the middle of the night to make sure that everyone who needed care received care. As we prepare for a possible second wave, the state has been working to build its stockpile of supplies. As the governor has shared, we are building toward a 98 million piece strategic stockpile. When the virus began circulating, testing availability was extremely limited. We've come a long way since that time. More than 3 million residents in New Jersey have been tested, and our positivity rate fell from over 5% to around 2%, 2 to 3%. We have been focused on increasing testing to the state's underserved communities. New Jersey's network of federally qualified health centers, which provide care to residents regardless of their ability to pay, have been vital to increasing access to testing. Together, we also implemented an initiative to ensure that migrant seasonal workers at farms had COVID-19 education and testing. Over 5,000 tests were administered to that population. We've also ramped up testing in mobile sites in our urban centers, Elizabeth, Patterson, Newark, Trenton, Atlantic City, and Camden, which have been so disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. Our testing goal right now is to run between 30 and 35,000 tests daily. And along with testing, a robust contact tracing effort is also vital to containing the virus. Contact tracing has also greatly expanded from 300 before the pandemic to nearly 2,000 contact tracers currently in place in New Jersey. If you test positive for COVID-19 or have been exposed to someone who has, you'll get a call from a contact tracer who will provide information on how you can safely isolate to protect your family, and even if you don't feel ill. A contact tracer will also ask who you've been in close contact with prior to the test, whether you have experienced any symptoms, and if so, when you first experienced those symptoms. A close contact is someone who has been within 6 feet of you for longer than 10 minutes. If you get a call from a contact tracer, please answer the call and share information on your close contacts to ensure that they too can get the help they might need. To enhance the New Jersey's contact tracing efforts, we have enlisted technology. We have launched an exposure notification mobile app last week. The app communicates through Bluetooth on mobile devices. It will detect and log anonymous codes from devices with the app that are in close contact within 6 feet of the user for 10 minutes or longer. The app can alert users if they have been potentially exposed to someone who has tested positive for COVID-19 and provide information on what to do next. We recognize that protecting individuals' privacy is key, and the app does not use location data or collect personal information. We also, please also download the COVID Alert NJ app. I know I've done it. It's a free exposure notification app. The mobile app is available to anyone 18 or older who lives, works, or attends college in New Jersey. Visit the Google Play Store or Apple App Store on your mobile device and search for COVID Alert NJ and click download. There have been more than 111,000 downloads of the app since our launch last Thursday. Along with contact tracing is the ability to safely quarantine or isolate. We have worked with every county to stand up safe quarantine sites throughout the state. The public health emergency has had an unprecedented impact on our state. Every corner of our state has been affected. There have been more than 209,000 cases, and sadly, we have lost more than 16,000 New Jerseyans to this virus. Across the nation, nursing homes and assisted living facilities have been at the epicenter of the pandemic. New Jersey was not spared from that impact. Although the number of outbreaks in these facilities have decreased, there are still more than 150 active outbreaks that we're currently tracking. So we are still very much concerned about the vulnerable population in these facilities. The governor's budget invests more than $1 million to boost the resiliencies of these facilities by creating an Office of Long-Term Care in the Department of Health dedicated to assisting the facilities in improving their infection control measures, their staffing, their supply stockpile, and their education and training. The department has implemented more than 24 of the reforms recommended in a report by an independent consultant to strengthen the resiliency of these facilities and improve their care. The department also created a long-term care emergency operations center to provide a centralized command structure to manage COVID emergency response in long-term care. The emergency center, chaired by Dr. David Adenaro, our Deputy Commissioner for Public Health Services, monitors testing of residents, staffing, supplies of PPE, and all that's needed to protect residents and staff. Stockpiling for these facilities is underway, along with ongoing inventory assessment. The department has also issued detailed guidance on reopening that requires facilities to meet certain benchmarks, including adequate infection control, testing, staffing, and personal protective equipment. Throughout the pandemic, New Jersey's hospitals were on the front lines, working tirelessly to save lives. We're thankful for their dedicated service. All facilities were greatly impacted. They were working around the clock to prepare for the surge and care for the overwhelming number of patients that came through their doors. The financial impact of COVID-19 remains as we continue to hear reports that residents are avoiding going to hospitals due to concerns of safety about the virus. Compared to last year, the emergency department cases have decreased by 23%. Hospital admissions have fallen by 8%. Outpatient visits by 22%. Total patient revenues have declined overall by 6.6%. This has occurred during a time where there has been an overall increase in the operating expenses of our hospitals by about 12%. And that does not include expenses of expanding bed capacity for the surge of COVID-19 cases. Along with the financial impact, we're seeing concerning health effects from delayed care and treatment. Hospitals are seeing escalated healthcare conditions that could have been effectively treated had the patients come in earlier. A patient with a diabetic wound that wasn't properly cared for, and now the tissue has been so damaged that more extensive intervention is required. Patients suffering from worsening respiratory illnesses like asthma and emphysema. Hospitals are working hard to relay to their communities that they are safe and ready to care for the residents in their communities. Recognizing that hospitals were hit hard by the virus, the federal government has established several funding sources for our hospitals. New Jersey hospitals, because they experienced such a high level of COVID-19 patients, have received more than $2.8 billion in CARES Act funding thus far. Of these funds, $71.2 million was allocated to reimburse hospitals to treat and test uninsured patients for COVID-19. The sacrifices of all of our New Jersey healthcare workers have been extraordinary. They were caring for patients under the most difficult circumstances, while also worrying about their own health and those of their loved ones. Their strength has been inspiring. As a tribute to their efforts, we have seen healthcare workers come out of retirement to join the response. In addition, we work to ensure that we could get more nursing students through graduation, through early graduation, and onto the field to boost the ranks of nurses throughout the state. Throughout the pandemic, however, most of the attention has been on health issues. However, there is no doubt that COVID-19 public health emergency has taken a toll on the mental health and emotional well-being of our residents. A poll conducted by the Kaiser Family Foundation in July found that 53% of adults in the United States reported that their mental health has been negatively impacted due to the stress over the novel coronavirus. As a state, we've been working together for more than 6 months to prevent the spread of COVID-19 in our state. We have adapted to new protocols and restrictions over this time. We know that this new normal will persist for the foreseeable future, and all these factors are causing what is called pandemic fatigue. Pandemic fatigue is a feeling of exhaustion from the effects of the public health emergency. The key sign of pandemic fatigue is overwhelming weariness. People may feel helpless and sad and irritable. Those experiencing this fatigue may have trouble focusing, trouble eating and sleeping, lack motivation, and become withdrawn. While we may be feeling burnout, it is important that we take steps to care for our physical and mental health. Work on getting more sleep, eating nutritious foods, unplug from social media and the news, go for walks, read a book, or try another activity that can help calm your mind. Connect with others by a phone call, video chats. Social support is vital to mitigating stress. For those who are dealing with stress, anxiety, or depression, please share the NJ Mental Health Care's helpline at 866-202-HELP, H-E-L-P. As we're still working to contain COVID-19, we're also preparing for the possibility of a twindemic, the seasonal flu. For that reason, it's critical that as many residents as possible get a flu vaccine as soon as possible. I received mine last week. While flu vaccine cannot protect you from COVID-19, it will help reduce flu illnesses in the state and help keep you out of doctors' offices or emergency rooms. Getting a flu vaccine is easy, and it's recommended annually by the State Department of Health and the CDC for everyone ages 6 months or older. And although flu season can extend through the early part of next year and sometimes even longer, it is essential to get the vaccine as early as possible to ensure the most protection, which is why the CDC recommends that you get the flu vaccine before the end of October. For our youngest and oldest residents, pregnant women, and those with chronic health issues, getting a flu shot is especially important. So as tired as we all are from battling this pandemic, we have to continue to take precautions, such as wearing face coverings and social distancing. This virus is still circulating, and we need to stay the course in this fight. We are planning aggressively for a second wave. PPE is being monitored every day and stockpiled. Additional ventilators have been purchased and are warehoused. Doses of remdesivir, the antiviral, to meet a surge demand are in our warehouse and in our hospitals. The collaborating entities, our level 1 trauma centers, are on notice, and we will be meeting bi-weekly with them. And plans are underway to promote stronger interfacility regional collaborations. So please continue to take steps to protect your community. Wear a face covering, stay 6 feet from others, maybe more. Wash your hands frequently, and if a contact tracer calls, please take the call. Provide the information they need to notify others. Download the COVID Alert NJ app today. And thank you for your time. And I look forward to answering any questions.
Judy, you are an absolute rock star, and it sounds like you've kind of done this before, but in all seriousness, the way you and your department, the state police and Colonel Callahan and Governor Murphy, we applaud you for your dedication and concern for the residents of New Jersey. And we were basically able to turn a really bad situation and kind of minimize what could have possibly been much worse into a positive situation. I think the residents of New Jersey heeded your warnings. We have taken precautions that were outlined by you, the Department of Health, and the state government to kind of curtail the spread of the virus. We will continue to be diligent. Our organization is working closely with small business owners and large business owners throughout the state. And we're doing our best to maintain the health and well-being of the residents of New Jersey on our behalf. Is there anything else you could recommend other than downloading the app and sharing that with our colleagues and clients? Is there anything else you could do or say relative to how we can help you keep New Jersey healthy and safe?
Yeah, thanks for that question, because we are seeing an uptick in cases, and we are seeing an uptick in hospitalizations. However, we are seeing that the positivity rates in most instances are below 5%, which is really important. If you feel sick, get tested. If you just want a test, go to the county sites. We have supported all of the counties, either through the CARES Act funding or through state designated funds, to be able to offer in every county testing for all individuals who need a test or want the test. So that's number one. Number two, stay alert and be informed. We will be rolling out a statewide, wide-scale COVID-19 vaccination plan. Our vaccine plan is due to the CDC October 16th. We're finalizing that. Our goal is to vaccinate, it's aspirational, 70% of the adults in New Jersey over a 6-month period when the vaccine becomes available. That will require every county 6 days a week to vaccinate between 3,000 and 4,000 residents. And that is what we are planning for. And we will need your help. We will need you to step up and learn as much as you can about the vaccine. Be knowledgeable. You are all influencers in New Jersey. You know that. And influencers have the power of knowledge and information and the power to promote good practices. And that's the most important thing that you can help us with.
Right. And I believe that your department and the state of New Jersey, by holding those press conferences on a daily basis, we're critical to getting the word out and getting information into the hands of the residents of New Jersey, which is vitally important because there is a lot of misinformation out there, and to have it be delivered by a credible source on a consistent basis allowed us to kind of take advantage of that particular situation to minimize the risk for those that are part of the, that were potentially exposed. Do you see, if we maintain the current levels of lower infection rates, would you anticipate in the event it turns the other way that we would again close the schools from any kind of in-place learning? Because I know that's a big concern for many households that are working remotely, and it's a big challenge for many families here in New Jersey.
As you know, we are now putting up a dashboard that identifies by county the number of outbreaks in schools. We have over 600 school districts, and I'm pleased to say, in terms of outbreaks, and you know, an outbreak is more than 2 cases in a particular school. In terms of outbreaks, I don't have it in front of me, but the total outbreaks are quite low. Total cases may be about 58, but the total outbreaks are maybe 13 or 14, which means that only 13 or 14 individual schools had more than 2 cases directly related to transmission in our schools. If it stays that way and we can keep the positivity rate in our communities low, I think we'll be in a pretty good place to keep the schools where they are. But we monitor it every single day. And as we're seeing a tick up in new cases, we look at new cases, positivity rate, number of cases per 100,000 population, RT transmission rate, and we put that all together to determine our public health actions.
That being said, is it up to the individual school districts to make the determination of closing a school? And does your department have any influence on that? Is that a collaborative effort? Is that exclusively the state? Is that exclusively the school district? Maybe you can expand on that.
You know how home rule works in New Jersey. So the individual districts do have a lot to say about the opening and closing, but they do that strongly in collaboration with the local health department. And at this point, we are in daily communication with our local health departments. And there's no one criteria that we use. So we look at what is going on in the community, what's going on in the individual school, and in open collaboration and dialogue, make the best decisions.
Great. Well, Judy, you're an absolute rock star. We can't thank you enough for your time. And more importantly, what you're doing for the state of New Jersey to keep all of our residents safe and healthy. We will abide by your aspirations, and we will continue to work diligently to be safe, work in safe environments, and help our clients and their employees maintain their health care and stay out of harm's way. So we can't thank you enough for your time today, and our regards to the governor and to Colonel Callahan and your team in New Jersey. We really appreciate all that you do.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, so thank you, Judy, and we are going to move forward on the agenda. We have up next, we are scheduled to have hospital telehealth executive Ken Sable, who is regional president for the South Market of Hackensack Meridian Healthcare. However, I see that he has not joined us. I'm going to see if Sarah, hello, Sarah. I was wondering if you could accommodate us by moving up your time slot, and I could introduce you so you can speak on behalf of, knowing that you're Senior Vice President of Policy and Development and Government Affairs. I would like to turn it over to you, give you the floor, and give
Great.
you the opportunity to join our healthcare symposium here for the New Jersey Health Underwriters Association, and have you share your knowledge and expertise with us as it relates to policies, politics, and pandemics.
Awesome. I am going to try and share my screen.
Excellent.
Let's see if we can make this work.
So far, so good. Take it away.
You can see? You can see the screen? Great.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, we can.
Fantastic. Thanks, Frank. And thank you to everybody for welcoming me. I've had a chance to pop in and out today throughout the entire symposium, and what an amazing lineup of speakers and insight and the like. And so Frank, to you and your team at the association, so honored to be here today. I have just a couple of slides really to help me stay on time and provide a little bit of context to what I'm going to talk about. So really just very briefly talking about the system. For those of you who are not familiar with RWJ-Barnabas, we are the state's most comprehensive integrated healthcare system. I'm sure when my colleague from Hackensack Meridian comes on, you'll hear something similar. Our marketing team spend a lot of time going back and forth with how we can be the biggest and the largest in whatever aspect. But really suffice it to say, you can see by the chart, that we span a lot of the state. Our service area covers about 5 million residents. We have 11 acute care hospitals, 3 children's hospitals, the Children's Specialized Network, about 34,000 employees, which makes us either the first or second largest employer in the state of New Jersey, private employer. Essentially, we're very big. But what that allows us to do is really to provide truly integrated care to our patients. So from the primary care side all the way through oncology, through birth to geriatrics, we are able to provide it all. So, I'm happy to be speaking right after the commissioner, and certainly want to put a little bit of context to the COVID numbers for our system. You can see the top line numbers. The things that I really want to highlight here are on April 13th, our system, our 11 acute care hospitals had 1,700 positive and PUI patients. That was our peak day. We had a couple of hospitals that were nearing 90% vent capacity, and we actually had one hospital that had 125% capacity for their beds for almost a week. And so when you talk about where we were back in the spring and the work that we did along with our partner hospitals throughout our system and the state, alongside the Department of Health and the commissioner and her team, really tremendous work. It showed the ability of government and big industry to be nimble, to pivot. We built field hospitals in a couple of days. We expanded our bed counts at our hospitals in a couple of weeks. We brought in, as the commissioner mentioned, both retired and new graduates to help support our healthcare team. So we really saw the best in our healthcare heroes throughout this pandemic. So I'm showing you the September 20th numbers. That is about at our lowest. We've seen anywhere from 30 to 50 at our low numbers of positive and PUI patients in our hospitals. As the commissioner mentioned, we are trending upward. Not only the number of New Jersey residents who are positive, but our hospitalizations are starting to tick upwards as well. And just of note, we have a hospital in Lakewood and a hospital in Monmouth County as well. And so we are monitoring very closely in certain hotspots and working with the state and our community members to try and protect our patients and our communities and support in any way possible. So, I think we all have to recognize, and I think you've heard a little bit about this, folks have alluded to this, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that our system, RWJ-Barnabas, like every other employer in the state, is experiencing a financial challenge like no other. Not only is this a health pandemic that we've never seen in our generations, but the financial impact is going to last us for years to come. And so this actually was an infographic just released by the Hospital Association a couple of days ago. Some other numbers I want to just highlight for you all, and forgive me because I want to be precise, so I'm going to read them. $200 million, that is the monthly revenue loss at the peak for our system. That's when we had shut our hospitals down completely, except for emergency and COVID care. $6 a unit, that was the cost this spring for gowns. Typically, just by way of comparison, a gown typically costs us about 50 cents per unit. So we really experienced in a unique way the financial impact of not only having to shut down the majority of our services, but also increase our costs at the same time. And while certainly I'm not going to pretend that the finances are as impacted today as they were back in the spring, it is certainly something that resonates and continues now. We have patients who continue to be afraid to come back to our facilities. We all know someone who is delaying care because of the pandemic. And that is not only bad for our hospital finances, but we know the long-term impacts of that for our community members is going to be felt by everybody. And certainly I do want to also add, we have received, and the commissioner mentioned, we have received a significant amount of CARES funding, and we thank the governor and his team for his strong advocacy back in the spring in regards to ensuring that hotspots like New Jersey and New York received funding first compared to the rest of the country. But I want to mention that that does not make us whole in by any way, shape, or form. So we too, as a healthcare system, struggled like the rest of the New Jersey economy. But I think, really what we saw out of COVID was healthcare heroes and, a true partnership with government. We've had a couple of bright spots, but really as we reflect back 6 or 7 months after the peak, we know that it did not change our system's focus, our mission, our vision, and our core strategies. What it really has done is in some ways accelerated that work. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples of that through the next couple of minutes. So first and foremost, for me, is equity and social determinants. And I know back in the spring, we talked a lot about how COVID was the great equalizer, in that anyone could come down with COVID, anyone could get sick, and anyone could see their symptoms deteriorate really quickly. And what I think we've seen over the last couple of months, and certainly what our system talks about a lot, is that COVID was really the great magnifier. And so we know our Black and Brown community members in particular experienced higher hospitalization rates, higher mortality rates, and the like. And that's really because of systemic and structural racism, generations of poverty, housing insecurity, and food insecurity, among a host of other things. And so, for our system, it has really been an opportunity to re-emphasize as a system and to ensure that we're looking at the social determinants. I am the chief of staff as well. In addition to being the system lobbyist, I'm the chief of staff to the social impact and community investment practice, which is about 4 years old for our system. And it's really our intentional, shifting mission to make sure we're focusing beyond the 4 walls of our hospitals, to make sure we're impacting patients in their communities. We're co-designing programs and policies in order to address equity, to dismantle racism, and to build healthier communities together. And so, this pandemic has certainly proven out the things that we've been saying for years, in that, social determinants are critical to health. We know that if positive patients who are being discharged from our hospital and we're telling them to go home and to isolate themselves, that's a privileged position that we're making that statement from, not thinking about whether they live in a single family home with multiple generations, in a single room apartment with multiple people, and where we're going to see the instances of COVID increase because they're unable to distance. And that's just one example of the way that we are trying to shift to make sure that we're recognizing our privilege, and the impact of disparities on care. And so ultimately, our goal is to move from, what you see on this slide as reality toward equality, but really true equity is the goal. And so I know, a couple of folks had asked questions about results, because this is a program and an initiative that has been going on for a couple of years. And really, I think what's unique about this program and many of our community members and businesses' efforts in this space is that we're not going to see a true return on these investments for a generation. And that's okay. It truly speaks to the power of our system investing in this, particularly during these struggling financial times, is that we've continued with this North Star, knowing that we're not going to have a short-term return on investment, knowing that this is going to take generations to truly see some outcomes. What I can talk to you a little bit about is some of the outputs, the short-term outputs we've seen. So just by way of example, RWJ Barnabas stood with the mayor of Newark for a 2020 commitment, and that was 3 years ago. We committed to hiring 250 Newark residents by 2020 and paying them a living wage. So I'm proud to say that actually as of last month, we had hired 577 Newark residents at an average hourly wage of $24.85. Now we know that every county, if you look at the United Way Alice report, every county has a different livable wage, and this is very distinct from the minimum wage, because we know that minimum wage does not provide our community members with an opportunity to work one job and support themselves and their families. It's really, we look at a livable wage, what opportunities can we provide there? And so that's just one small output. Additionally, Jersey City Medical Center in January trained 450 employees on a national human trafficking model so that we can better identify victims of human trafficking. New Jersey is a hotspot for human trafficking because of our location, the availability of planes, trains, automobiles, if you will, being near international airports, being near ports and the like. So of those 450 employees trained, that's a significant percentage of our Jersey City workforce. In the 6 months since that training, we've already identified 4 victims of human trafficking and provided support both in our hospital and within the community. It seems like a very small number, but I can tell you that over the last 5 years before this training was implemented, we'd only identified 1 victim of human trafficking. So we're seeing some significant impact in the short term. And the final example I'm going to give relates to food. Since COVID began, since the peak about 6 months ago, we have had a partnership with the Common Market and Jersey Cares. We've supported the delivery of 4,000 boxes of fresh food. That's fruits, vegetables, and some canned goods, but really with a healthy focus. That has been delivered to communities in need throughout our service area. So just referring back to that map from one of my previous slides. And so we don't know the true impact of that. We know food security is a significant impact. I think it's been a bit surprising to many of us how, the feedback we've gotten from our food banks throughout the state in terms of the significant need. And so we're really proud of that number, but just anecdotally, I can tell you, our partners received a thank you note. And because of the focus on healthy foods in those boxes, that note from one of the community recipients said it was the first time she received a donation where she felt as though her partners really wanted to live and her to live and really cared if she lived. And so that's really meaningful for us as an organization, for me, as someone who this is, a true passion of mine. And I think, for all of us, making sure that all of our community members are healthy really improves the state of New Jersey as a whole. So I'm going to move on to the second way that we're accelerating our strategic plan, and that's telehealth. There are a couple of quick statistics, up on this slide. The statistic from March 13th, where there are 0 visits, is a little bit misleading in the fact that we didn't have a code for telehealth until March. And so technically the way we code, we didn't have any visits. We certainly did have some, albeit limited telehealth. I can tell you last year we had about 10,000 visits total. And, less than 2 months later, we had 17,000 visits, telehealth visits in a week. And certainly that was a significant portion of our medical group's charge in the peak of the pandemic in the spring, was to be able to shift our patients to wherever feasible to telehealth to make sure that we were continuing to provide care. You can see the totals through July. We continue to average somewhere between 6,000 and 9,000 visits a week still, as we've seen the number of office visits go up. Our telehealth has gone down, and so we're still seeing about 30% of our visits through telehealth right now through our medical groups, which is significant progress. And I think we all can agree that this is one of the bright spots for healthcare, both from a provider perspective and a patient perspective. There were a significant number of federal and state barriers to telehealth. And, I'm certainly not criticizing our regulators in any way. In New Jersey, many of you know, we only had a telehealth law go into effect 3 years ago. And, there's always been a commitment to revisit that as we've all gotten our feet wet in that space. But we know, for example, at the federal level, that there were rules that prohibited patients from being in their homes and receiving a telehealth appointment. And so things like that have been lifted from the feds and the state to allow us to expand opportunities has really been a huge positive, I think, for this state and our patients and our providers. And you'll notice I listed in terms of challenges, both patient hesitation and provider hesitation. I think that from a patient perspective, folks felt as though they couldn't receive care that was equal to if they were in the office. And we've been able to dissuade them from that. And I think as someone who's used telehealth throughout the pandemic, when we couldn't go into offices, I was really able to connect with my provider on a personal level. She was able to talk to me. She spent a lot of time with me. And from a patient, I felt really, treated well in a secure environment from a compliance perspective. And it didn't have any difference really than an in-person visit. But I also think that providers were really hesitant on whether they could provide that care to our patients in the same manner through telehealth. And so we've really seen a lot of our providers at RWJBH embrace telehealth in a way that we didn't expect when we turned the calendar to 2020. And so some of that is just acceleration of where we knew we were going, but a lot of that changing attitude, I think, is going to help us make some of these opportunities more permanent. And so we look forward to working with the state and the federal government on making permanent some of the waivers that we had received. We've certainly pretty quickly enhanced our technology and capabilities so that we can continue to provide telehealth in such a robust manner in a way we didn't anticipate 9 or 10 months ago. So I think there's a real opportunity here. And I would also be remiss if I didn't mention behavioral health and telehealth. We quickly shifted in our substance use and addiction space to providing support groups through telehealth. We've shifted in a really positive manner, and overwhelmingly our support groups are seeing the benefits of providing these teleservices. So I think there's a real opportunity in that space. And Frank, I noticed you came back on, so I know I'm running short. 2 more slides, I promise I'll be fast. But I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the 2 partnerships that we announced in September. The first is our continuing work with St. Peter's. And so we signed a definitive agreement with them back in September. Only a month ago, it seems like an eternity some days. We still have 12 to 18 months of regulatory review. We're pleased that we were able to find a way so that St. Peter's could maintain its Catholic identity. I think that's really unique about this partnership. For New Brunswick and Middlesex County and the state as a whole, the idea of having a true academic medical center hub in New Brunswick with the 2 campuses, plus the Cancer Institute and Rutgers, is amazing. It puts us on a platform with some of the other premier academic medical centers throughout the country. So we're very hopeful that this partnership will continue. We've committed to keeping services at the current levels. We've committed to maintaining the employee services at the same level. We will be transitioning those things over to a unified system once we receive regulatory approval. but we're really, really excited about this opportunity. And the last one is Braven Health. This is New Jersey's first and only payer and provider owned Medicare Advantage plan, announced last week. RWJ Barnabas is currently seeking DOBI approval to be a full partner in this plan. So as of right now, our provider network is available, but we stood last month with Hackensack Meridian and Horizon to announce this new plan. We think it's a really unique opportunity for the state of New Jersey, certainly targeted to our MA eligible residents. However, it really is just another way that we're providing unique value-based care. We're partnering with both payers and providers in a way that I think we haven't seen until recently. And so I'm really excited about the future of healthcare. Certainly some challenges ahead, but we are moving full steam forward. So Frank, with that, I'll pause. I don't know if there were any questions in the chat box or anything that you think that I could answer that I didn't.
Well, Sarah, a couple things come to mind. First of
Sure.
all, other than trying to feed the hungry, give care to those that have not access to care, the merge with St. Peter's Hospital and Medical Center, and the fact that you're launching a new Medicare product, it sounds like there's nothing going on over there.
Every day is an adventure. Listen, healthcare is moving. I think, when we flipped the calendar to January 2020, we said, this is going to be an exciting year. I think we say that every year. Healthcare is certainly an amazing area to be working right now. As the lobbyist and someone who's driving some of the social impact mission, every day is amazing for me. It's an opportunity to learn and grow and take care of our communities in different ways. We couldn't have anticipated COVID. It's just providing yet another way. And certainly it's been a struggle, but you're seeing us and many other players in this market move forward in really exciting ways.
Right. Now, I will say that many of us at NJAHU should follow your lead and example with being thankful and grateful for everything that we have, and also to maybe extend a helping hand in the community in any way that you can, be it donations to a food bank. It doesn't have to be monetary, it could be your time.
Yes.
But this is a time in our country where we need to come together to share our common belief and do unto others as you would like others do unto you. And you're setting a fine example, and we appreciate that. And we're very proud to have you part of the program. We'd like to have you back again. And we thank you for your time.
Thanks, Frank. I really appreciate it. And thank you for those encouraging words. Our mission, we're really proud of how we've moved into the communities, and we think there's a role for everybody in that space. So thank you.
Thank you. So now, at this time, we're going to transition, and a nice segue right now is being able to introduce Ken Sable, who's a friend of the program and has been with us in several different capacities formerly, but he is the regional president of the South Market for Hackensack Meridian Healthcare. And I'd like to turn this over to Ken. And thank you for being accommodating. We had to flip-flop carriers, but you're going to have your full say, and you'll be able to roll with that.
Well, thank you, Frank. And I apologize. I had a little technological snafu, and I was on and I could hear you, but you couldn't see me. So I'm glad you were able to be efficient and pivot to Sarah, who, by the way, gave a really great presentation. In fact, I could probably use 90% of her slides and say the same thing, minus the St. Peter's part at the end there. So first of all, I'm really appreciative of the opportunity to be here today, albeit under less than ideal circumstances. Last time I was in front of this group was in person at Fords Gate Country Club a couple of years back, and we had a great panel discussion at that time. Lots changed since then. Obviously, we're in a virtual world primarily. And rather than put up slides at this point, I thought what I would do is, I've been asked to address a number of different topics, and I thought I would give you kind of my spin on some of them. And perhaps that will be, stimulating additional inquiry as a result. So much like Sarah, I'm the regional president at Hackensack Meridian Health. We have seen, devastating consequences of COVID on the front lines, obviously from the patient perspective and what it's done to patients and families, and also our team members, not to mention what it's done to our industry. We're seeing now for the first time since the Balanced Budget Act of 1997, a significant financial impact to this industry. The average margin right now in New Jersey hospitals is a negative 5%, a little bit under that, -4%, -5%. And about 60% of New Jersey hospitals right now are not profitable. It is an incredibly challenging time for all of us. One of the positives, which I'll talk about later, is certainly the teamwork and everything we've been able to do. But without a doubt, this is unprecedented, and we are all, trying to figure out how to get out of it and when it will end. We've talked about wave 2. I would argue we never left wave 1. We never really got a respite other than, a brief decrease in patients, but it never went away. And we're still in the midst of it. And unfortunately, many of our hospitals at this point are actually starting to see a bump back up. Only 3 weeks ago, Jersey Shore University Medical Center had 0 COVID positive patients. This morning we have 34. We have patients in the intensive care unit. We have patients intubated again. And we're all very scared about what this will mean, obviously, as gyms open up and indoor dining, and certainly as it gets colder out and we're not able to do all of the outdoor activities. It is incredibly important that we all maintain social distancing, proper hand hygiene, and certainly utilizing PPE and utilizing it correctly, not under the mouth, but actually over the nose as well. So I've been asked to comment on a couple of things around COVID and some of our responses to that. I will say that we have gotten back to elective surgeries, obviously, since May. Our volume has come back throughout our network, probably about 85 to 90% of total. But again, with the virus still here, we're really concerned that the virus is here, the flu season's coming. Will we be able to maintain the status quo throughout this season? If you look at some of the models that are out there, and NJAHU, New Jersey Hospital Association, put out a model that they're projecting we could see about 75% of the March COVID levels again this winter, particularly January and February. If that were to happen, it would completely devastate the industry, much worse than it's already happened. As everybody knows, fortunately, we benefited from CARES Act funding and other governmental funding, which didn't keep us whole, but certainly lessened the financial burden. And to that end, what is that financial burden? Well, to date, Hackensack Meridian Health has received about $480 million of money, but our total net loss of the network before that is over $1 billion. So, while we were not able to take care of patients and perform elective surgeries and do all the things that are generally, the profit centers of our hospitals, the volume was down, the utilization was down, and at the same time, we were spending enormous amounts of money on agency labor, high premium dollar labor, and equipment, securing anywhere and everything we could get, including ventilators. And obviously, I heard Sarah speak about some of the PPE, where we were paying 15, 20 times or more the going rate to secure as much equipment as we could to take care of our patients and the communities that we serve. I've been asked about what effect does this pandemic have when it comes to people's overall feelings about healthcare and any personal accountability, and do I think people will take better care of themselves? I don't think I'm as optimistic on that, honestly. I think that unfortunately behavioral health in this country has been a pandemic, honestly, before COVID. We all know about the opioid epidemic and what's been going on with that. And I think that this has only made it worse when it comes to mental health and behavioral health. People losing their jobs, people losing their homes, you know, the anxiety and stress of that on top of everything else that they had before has put a number of people over the edge. And I think for the first time, we're actually seeing this affect the healthcare provider population more than ever before. You know, we saw a physician in New York City who took her own life tragically, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. There is that second victim syndrome, where the providers who are witnessing this and feel powerless to be able to help the patients that they pledged to serve has taken an enormous toll on the healthcare provider community as well. And we never had enough behavioral health resources before that. So I think this is going to stress the system even further. And with regard to people's health, just a personal, you know, note is that, you know, until my personal belief is until we correct the food situation, the diet of this country, you know, we know the obesity levels are out of control, the processed foods. As a physician, I'm an emergency physician by training. Until we address that, I don't believe we will be able to achieve the levels of health and safety that we need to provide for our country's citizens. So what's been a bright spot, and Sarah mentioned it, which is telehealth. So I'm a technologist by training. Before medicine, I was a computer science engineer, big into informatics and technology, and always projected and predicted that telehealth would do to the traditional model of healthcare what Amazon did to the retail industry. And I think we're starting to see that now. And when you look at examples of, you know, a patient who's 85 years old, who has congestive heart failure, who needs to go to the doctor, the patient's son or daughter has to take a day off of work, get them in the car, they're short of breath as they walk to the car, to walk into the doctor's office, all to get weighed to make sure they're not retaining water, to make sure they're taking their medications. Well, we have technology now. We have Wi-Fi enabled scales. We have Fitbits. We have Apple Watches that can track your heart rate. We have companies like Pillow, Pillo, that actually Hackensack Meridian Health invested in through our innovative institute to be able to monitor remotely whether patients are actually taking their medications. So it's these type of technology enhancements that have, I believe, enabled us to turn the page and finally move forward with adopting telehealth, which I hope will be here to stay. I would implore, you know, the payers in the room and your companies to understand how important it is to reimburse for those services. It's a benefit to the patient. It's a convenience for the patient. It makes the system more efficient. And, you know, quite frankly, you know, I believe that telehealth is going to be the future of how we do most of non-hospital outpatient medicine. You know, and some argue that it should be reimbursed at a lower amount. Well, I would argue that even though you don't have maybe the brick and mortar of the building and some of that infrastructure, the IT infrastructure is not cheap either, to set it up, to maintain it, to train people on it. So I look at it, we're trading one cost for another, but at the end of the day, if we're collectively working together in terms of keeping patients safe and healthy, telehealth is an absolute no-brainer. And you know, this is just an acceleration of what was coming anyway. In addition, you know, we're seeing that emergency department visits are down 25 and 30% in many of our hospitals. Not surprising that people are, you know, avoiding the hospital. Some are avoiding still elective surgeries, some are just avoiding it altogether. And some are taking advantage of the telehealth opportunities and the urgent care centers that are out there and some of those lower cost settings. So again, you know, it's really important that we work together with regulation, with the payers and the providers to ensure that we are appropriately compensating providers for that work. So the next question I think is particularly apropos to this group, which is how is the economic situation hospitals are experiencing altered our strategy in negotiating future contracts with insurance carriers? And did this pandemic result in more cooperation between the parties? I definitely think there's been more cooperation. You know, at a time when we needed the payers to, ease back on some of the denial process while we were getting absolutely slammed. And I'm really pleased that actually occurred. Payments for telehealth, many of our providers and payers came together and collaborated and were able to ensure that this worked. So kudos to all the people in the room who were part of making that happen. As far as the future goes, I think one of the things that this exposed significantly was the challenge in the current payment models. And particularly, most of us are still fee-for-service. Some of us have embarked on some various value-based purchasing reimbursement models. But interestingly, those providers, and I'm referring specifically to some physician practices that I have relationships with, they were paid on a capitated model. And they made it through this pandemic pretty much unharmed. And those of us on fee-for-service were destroyed. Now you have to look at where the money goes, and again, I'm not a subject matter expert on your side of the business, on the payer side, but all the premiums, were being paid, but the utilization was, a fraction of what it normally is. Now, of the utilization, obviously some of it was much more expensive because COVID patients would take 3 weeks in the hospital or more on average. They'd be on ventilators. But you had premiums going to the payer, you had decreased utilization, and a significant amount of expense incurred by the providers, hospitals, doctors, and whatever, as I mentioned earlier. And so the model completely broke down. The providers perhaps are sitting, the payers perhaps are sitting with more cash. The providers do not have any of that cash. In fact, they're putting out cash to cover the enormous expenses. And, we started to talk about, and I actually led a panel for the American Hospital Association's regional policy board for the Region 2, was around, should we be thinking about alternative payment models, and particularly, capitation as a model to have a more reliable and predictable cash flow. So I thought that was very interesting, and it certainly be interested in, the thoughts of this group. But that was one area where we were completely exposed, and it broke down to the detriment of our industry. Again, with the money from CARES Act and other federal funds, we've been able to claw back some of that. But if this virus is here with us for a couple of years, I am greatly concerned that there will not be another rescue out there, and we will not be able to survive. With regard to a vaccine, and I'm a clinician, big believer in vaccines, but even if we have a vaccine by the end of the year, who's going to be the first to line up to take it? Is it proven? Is it gone through the rigorous, regulatory and scientific scrutiny that vaccines normally would go through? I'm not so sure. We've struggled to get mandatory flu vaccines. This is a whole different animal. And, I'm predicting even if we have a vaccine, we may not have more than 20-25% uptake on the initial go round. So, this virus will probably be here for a while, and this is a very real possibility. Again, either we get a vaccine, we get herd immunity, or we have reliable therapeutics, whether remdesivir or others turn out to be the case, the jury's still out. Last but not least, I've been asked to comment a little bit on the politics. Actually, before that, I do want to say, and to what Sarah said, there's a question about whether hospitals should market and sell health insurance. And Sarah stole a little bit of my thunder there, but Hackensack Meridian Health, in partnership with Blue Cross, announced Braven Health, as you know, as a Medicare Advantage product in New Jersey. Robert Wood Johnson Barnabas is pending joining, obviously pending Dobie approval, as Sarah mentioned. But this is a great opportunity for the provider-payer collaboration to be able to serve patients in the most efficient way and provide them with the best options. So I'm a big believer in that. As far as who sells it and brokers, I'm not as worried about that. I just think, together, combining our knowledge, our experience, our ideas, leveraging the strength and brands of our largest and most comprehensive health system in New Jersey, combined with large organizations like Horizon, for example, are going to give patients wonderful choices in the marketplace. I'm not going to comment specifically politically, but I've been asked about whether I see Joe Biden's plan to invest more money in community-based health centers as a plus or minus. I've been asked about surprise billing as a federal piece of legislation, and I've been asked about whether the Trump administration and HHS have done enough to provide financial assistance to New Jersey hospitals. I'm going to start with that one first quickly and say, I think that, again, no system is perfect and we can't let perfect be the enemy of good. But I think we did a very good job, both at the state and federal level, of being able to get money to the places that needed it most. I was probably more critical of the initial phase, which distributed money, not necessarily based on the level of COVID that was in our communities. So naturally, New Jersey being in the epicenter along with New York, didn't get enough, I believe, in the first tranche of money. But as time went on, I think we did get more of a fair share. But again, as I mentioned, it did not replace what was lost, and we're going to have a hard time getting back to normal, and praying that this is not going to be here for more than the next several months. Although, as I mentioned earlier, I'm not so optimistic. With regard to Joe Biden, Biden's plans call for some increased federal health spending in other areas like rural health and mental health funding, doubling federal funding for community health centers. The one thing that I think is positive, really positive potentially for New Jersey, is reversing the scheduled cuts to the disproportionate share hospital payments for those hospitals, many in New Jersey, which serve those without insurance. And that's a big concern for us. The last thing I want to highlight is you may have heard about the Medicare wage index changes. So for those who don't know, Medicare uses this wage index across the country in a zero-sum process to pay for medical services based on the costs of labor in those communities. So naturally, New York has a higher multiple for payments. So with fiscal year 2015, which started in October of 2014, the Monmouth, Ocean, and Middlesex County hospitals were put into the service area, or the CBSA, for New York City, which resulted in a significant increase in funding to those hospitals in those three counties. Under Seema Verma, it's actually just went into effect October 1st. The three counties, Middlesex, Monmouth, and Ocean counties, have now been taken out of that and put into a new New Brunswick Lakewood CBSA, which drops the reimbursement for the same amount of work we're doing by a significant amount. Just to Hackensack Meridian Health alone, the net impact on an annual basis is $120 million. So we're working hard on that to restore that. Those type of cuts make it untenable to continue to do what we do. We're working all fronts to see if we can at least delay that. Just so you know, there's a 5% impact only in year one, which is October 1st of 2020 to October 21st of 2021. But following that, the full effect goes into effect, which is going to affect Robert Wood Johnson Barnabas, Hackensack Meridian Health, Centra State, Atlantic Health, and many other hospitals and health systems in those regions. And then finally, I just want to leave on a positive note, which is that, I think that is there any positive to come out of COVID? First and foremost, teamwork. Sarah mentioned it. I couldn't agree more. We came together, strict, fierce competitors came together, collaborated, integrated, aligned, shared resources. I became close with Bill Arnold, who is my counterpart at Robert Wood Johnson Barnabas for their Southern market. I sent him contacts to help him get PPE. He sent me resources. there was a whole new level of collaboration, which is really a wonderful thing that when push comes to shove, and we're in a bind, we all figure out a way to pull together and work together to make things right for our patients and the communities that we serve. The second is, on a personal note, is family time. I went straight through from college to medical school to residency to working as an attending physician in Brooklyn, New York at Maimonides for over a decade, into hospital administration, and barely took a breath. And for the first time, I almost felt like the universe was telling us, stop, unplug from the machines, stop what you're doing. I have a 9 and 11-year-old boy and girl with busy activities, dance, football, basketball, cheerleading, what have you. And all of it stopped. And it gave me the perspective to kind of, recharge my batteries while I was still working 7 days a week at the hospital, but maybe smell the roses, see the forest through the trees a little bit. And I hope that, some of you, were able to experience that as well. And then lastly, I think the last real positive was telehealth. I think, again, this is gonna be one of those disruptive changes that will change the entire industry for the better. As a technologist, I'm an early adopter. I decide who's going to cut my hair based on whether I can make an appointment online. That's a true story. And, I think more and more the expectation is that people want that ease and access and convenience of having it available right here, right now, at my fingertips. And, telehealth is giving them that convenience and support, which they enjoy in many other areas, whether it's banking or retail or food. So with that, I will turn it back over to you, Frank, and thank you again for allowing me to spend a few minutes with you, and I'm happy to take any questions at your time.
Well, the first question I have is, who cuts your hair? Because it looks really good right now. So
Thank
if you made an appointment online, I know you weren't going to Sports Clips over there. So, but no, we truly appreciate the long-term relationship and friendship that you have with our organization. We appreciate the fact, as a trained physician and going up through the system and now being on the administrative side, you have a full comprehensive outlook and evaluation on how the system works, where the inefficiencies are, where the efficiencies are, and you understand all the intricate players involved, from the provider to the insurance company to the broker. So having you as one of our allies to be able to collaborate with to do future work is immensely important to the organization. So we appreciate your time, your involvement, and we do also thanks for accommodating us with the flip of the schedule. And before we close, I wanted to turn it over to our current president, Rob Saffow, who's actually in his second term as president because of the pandemic. So he's been tied into duty. And Dr. Sable, we'd like to thank you for your time and appreciate your support. We look forward to having you in future years.
Thank you very much. We all have a role, and if we work together, we can accomplish great things. So thank you again for your partnership.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Rob, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm going to turn it over to you, boss.
All right. Thanks, Frank. I appreciate it. First and foremost, I want to thank you, Frank, our State of the State Conference Chair. I want to shout out a special thank you to Lisa Strug and Jonathan Jaffe from Jaffe Communications, who are really a backbone of our association. Thank you to the committee who volunteered a lot of hours to help make this conference a success. And most importantly, thank you to our speakers and those who participated today. I want to take a second and just talk about what the association has been through and done and where we are, especially given this pandemic. I think we've done a great job in giving you the tangible and intangible tools that you pay for as a member. The tangibles such as access to legislation, compliance assistance, CE credits, access to your carrier partners throughout the state. We've continued to serve all that. Intangibles, we have continued to reach out and talk with our legislators. If you go on NJAHU.org and you look at our logo, there is 2 key phrases that surround the logo. On the bottom, it says America's Benefit Specialist. That's who you are. That's who we are. On the top, it says protecting the consumer's future. That's what we do. As a member of this association, you need to wear that badge very proudly. If you have folks that work in your office who are not members, or you're meeting with carriers who are not members, it's important for us to share in this message and let them know that there's strength in numbers and we all need to come together as one. For those of you who are not members, this is my plea to you to come join our association. When we are out in the field meeting with legislators, with lobbyists, with government officials, 601 members sounds much better than 600 members, which sounds better than 599. We are America's benefit specialists, and we are protecting the consumer's future every day. With that said, the Atlantic City Convention is scheduled for April 26th through 28th. We are trying and planning to do it in person. We're going to continue monitoring everything that's put out by the state, by Atlantic City, by the hotel. Our goal is to do it live, but we will continue to talk to you and keep you informed as things go on. It's a virtual world we're living in. What can I say? And with that said, thank you for everyone that joined. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for being a member. And we look forward to future events, and we look forward to seeing you again. Have a great afternoon, everybody.